Hello there, and welcome. A hush gathers like dew at the edge of evening. Tonight, a question leans close, the way a tide leans toward a shore. Why do some things appear out of season, older than their sky, refusing the schedules written by light? Wherever the listener rests, under city glow, beside a midnight window, in a small room where a fan turns slow circles, comfort settles. If the listener wishes to drift with more nights like this, the channel waits like a small lantern. Would a quiet tap to subscribe help him find the way back when the sea is dark? Now the water within the mind grows very still. He hears of a star that should not exist, and yet it does. It carries a nickname borrowed from long lives, a rumor of antiquity that once seems to outrun the universe. Astronomers describe it as a nearby subgiant, its distance steadied by precise parallax measured in space, its spectrum caught by prisms and patient silicon. In that spectrum they find a poverty of metals, almost no iron, only the faintest handwriting of earlier fires. In the language of astrophysics, metals mean anything heavier than helium. In the language of wonder, metals mean memory, the ashes of previous suns. This one offers very little ash. He imagines the star as a pale ember wandering the galactic halo, threading a high, rough orbit above the bright disk like a pilgrim on a mountain path. Its color holds to a quiet straw, and in that color lies the record of scarcity. The star's light is neither hasty nor loud. It is the patience of fusion, the long conversion of gravity into breath. He watches with inward eyes as it drifts over the Milky Way's plain, a bell without a clapper, ringing only in the intervals of its passing. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The motifs circle like low clouds around a hill. The sky holds the star's steady flicker. Stone remembers pressure and age. The ocean suggests the way light waves lap across a detector. Silence becomes the space between measurements. Memory is the soft ledger kept by elements, each atom a bead on the string of time. He lets the words repeat, not for emphasis, but for rhythm, like footsteps on a path worn smooth. A grounding detail arrives as gently as a leaf. Models of stellar evolution allow ages to be read from temperature and brightness, from a star's slow climb away from the main sequence. Space observatories refine distance using angles so small they hide inside a fraction of a hair's breadth. Spectroscopy reads the chemistry of the photosphere, the thin skin where photons finally escape. From these ingredients, the light, the distance, the color, an age emerges, wrapped in uncertainties that never fully leave. He imagines the star forming when the universe still counts its hundreds of millions on one hand. A small cloud cools inside a halo of dark matter, the unseen scaffold that shapes the first light. Perhaps a nearby supernova salts the cloud with a touch of carbon and a whisper of oxygen, and then the cloud collapses. Perhaps not. The star gathers, ignites, and begins the long patience of fusing hydrogen to helium, a soft, steady song. It is not the very first, not a zero-metal ghost, yet it is early enough to feel like a leftover dawn. He leans closer to the image. The star moves through the Milky Way like a slow bell. Each pass above the galactic plane is a breath. He imagines it gliding now over the night, a faint point easily lost to eyes that live near streetlights and screens. The star is there regardless, patient as a thought that never asks to be spoken. In this patience, he senses kindness. What does it mean for something to arrive late? The star is born early, but its story arrives late, its photons stepping into instruments after an immense crossing, like messages corked into bottles and set adrift on a black ocean. He imagines quiet fissures on a coast of thought, lifting bottles one by one, reading the light without speaking. The thought widens. Perhaps the universe is full of arrivals that seem out of place only because his calendar is small. Perhaps lateness is not error but the angle from which time is seen. He opens a window and the air reminds him of distant weather. On Earth, a troposphere thick with water and salt builds its own clocks. Trees lay down rings. Corals inscribe days into their skeletons. Ice holds the breath of ancient winds in tiny glass. The star does none of this. It writes only in photons and scarcity. Yet those alone sketch an era when heavy elements are few, when complexity waits to be taught, when galaxies feel more like frameworks than cities. The image settles. A bare frame of a house under a vast sky, timbers in place, rooms still imagined. He wonders, not with urgency, but with the soft curiosity that precedes sleep. Could such austerity host planets? Thin worlds without iron hearts? Oceans without many of the minerals that living cells often borrow? Observations hint that planets form around an astonishing variety of stars, even where metals are sparse. If a world circles a star like this, does it build mountains or only dunes? Does it brew a chemistry that learns to speak, or does it remain quiet, a mirror for starlight and not much else? The question lingers, like a tin cup left under a slow rain. The invitation returns like slack water. Imagine placing a fingertip on a window pane and feeling the star's age as a coolness in the glass. Imagine a map drawn from scarcity, each missing element a white space where possibility hums. Imagine standing on a beach of thought where the ocean is time and seeing a small boat appear on the horizon, late but intact, the paint unchipped, the ropes neatly coiled, as if delay itself is a kind of preservation. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He lets the words pass again, slower. The sky speaks in wavelengths measured to fractions of a hair's breadth. Stone on Earth holds zircons older than continents, small crystals that whisper of an early ocean and a young sun. The ocean climbs and falls against familiar beaches, rehearsing the moon's pull. Silence holds between heartbeats. Memory gathers in synapses, in libraries, in the faint gold of old photographs, and also in the iron that is not there within the star. He rests with a final gentle wonder as the section dims. If light can misremember time, or if measurement can misremember light, what other elders walk the halls of the night beyond his notice? Arriving late, unhurried, carrying stories with too few words, and therefore more quiet. The star continues to burn. The room grows softer. The tide of thought ebbs, leaving smooth sand. He rests within the hush and lets a deeper hush arrive, one older than stars. The first darkness does not glare. It glows faintly, like embers under a blanket. Before the first sunrise, before the first stone cools in any world, a hot beginning expands and cools. Simple elements condense from light, hydrogen, a trace of helium, and the universe becomes a breath held. He listens, unhurried, and notices that the darkness is not empty. It is a room filled with a very thin wind. A grounding detail steadies the image. Roughly 380,000 years after the beginning, free electrons and protons settle into neutral atoms, and the young cosmos turns transparent. Photons, once trapped in a bright fog, slip free and begin their long flight. They arrive today as a cool afterglow near 2.7 degrees above absolute zero, a microwave hush mapped by patient observatories as a near-uniform field sprinkled with tiny temperature ripples. These ripples are small, about 1 part in 100,000, yet they are enough to seed the later architecture of galaxies and their clusters. The darkness remembers its own weather. He imagines those early minutes and hours as a sea without. Shores, a dense, hot plasma where pressure moves like music. In that sea, gravity and light argue gently. Gravity pulls matter inward, pressure pushes it back, and the argument becomes a rhythm. Spherical waves expanding through the young cosmos, the earliest acoustics. Space is said to be silent. But here, before vacuum grows clean, the medium exists, and sound, if there were ears to hear, travels. Baryon acoustic oscillations. The phrase is technical, but the image is simple. A drum skin being struck once everywhere at once, then ringing in concentric ripples. Much later, when the fog clears, the ring freezes into the distribution of matter, a preferred spacing faintly repeated across the grand map of galaxies. The darkness speaks by leaving rings. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He touches each word as if counting beads. The sky, in this section, is not overhead but everywhere, a bright fog becoming a dark room pricked by whispers of temperature. Stone has not yet formed, and yet its possibility lives in the density ripples, the seeds of future worlds. The ocean moves without shorelines, a sound field expanding in every direction. Silence becomes an adjective for later times when vacuum reigns. Memory is all that remains when motion cools, a fingerprint of ripples held in the afterglow. He pictures the first darkness as a vast, black ocean scattered with floating snow, photons cooling as they drift, each flake a small relic of a once blinding storm. The ocean's surface is smooth, almost too smooth, and yet if he leans close he can see the ripples, tiny crescents no higher than a thought. He imagines a slow, cosmic heartbeat ticking through them, a metronome that measures not seconds, but eons. The image softens further. A child's breath fogging a winter window. When the fog clears, faint rings remain where warmth once pressed. The window is the sky itself. He returns to the detail that feels like a compass. The acoustic scale, the size of that early sound horizon, settles into the universe's structure as a distance a little over 100 megaparsecs. A subtle rhythm repeated in how far apart galaxies like to gather. It is as if the cosmos, once, long ago, hummed a single note, and the note still lives in the spacing of its choir. Surveys of galaxies trace the pattern like fishermen tracing old currents by the way nets tug. He does not rush this thought. He lets it float. A question rises, gentle as mist. Can nothingness carry a memory? If the early universe begins near featureless, if quantum fluctuations are tiny, random shivers, how do they become the blueprint for everything? Inflationary ideas suggest a brief, extraordinary stretching that magnifies the smallest jitters into seeds, but the language remains soft in his mouth. Perhaps, maybe, it seems. He does not argue. He lets the question echo. Can the first darkness hold on to what it once stirred, and if it does, is memory a property of matter, or of geometry, or of the simple act of being? He invites himself quietly to imagine pressing an ear, not to the ground, but to the night itself, and hearing what the early ocean leaves behind, a low, even tone beneath the static, a hum embedded in the microwave snow. Imagine the universe as a great conch shell. Place it to the mind and listen. The sound is not sound as lungs and larynx know it. It is pattern, spacing, probability made visible. Still, the metaphor calms. A shell remembers a sea by geometry, alone. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The words return, slightly rearranged as if the hand drew them again in the sand. The sky hums. Stone waits its turn, a condensation of later time. The ocean pulls back, leaving rings of wet sand dazzling under a first, impossible sunrise. Silence, in this telling, is not the absence of sound, but the interval that makes rhythm possible. Memory is the persistence of intervals. He thinks of neutrinos flitting through this early theater, light and indifferent, their own background cooling as they travel, a ghostly weather not yet directly heard. He thinks of dark matter, unseen mass passing through light without interaction, acting as scaffolding, a frame that gathers ordinary matter into sheets and filaments. These are scientific guesses and measurements, careful and provisional, and yet the image they compose is simple. a web stretched taut across a swelling emptiness. Dew collects where strands cross. In time, those dewdrops become galaxies. He sees them in his mind like lanterns along a night bridge. Another question forms, not demanding an answer. If the first darkness speaks in ripples that later harden into space between galaxies, dew-present silences, personal, cultural, planetary, also harden into shapes that steer what comes next. He does not insist. He lets the analogy flicker and fade, a moth circling a porch light. The value is not in certainty, but in the tenderness of the wondering. A grounding note returns. The afterglow's temperature is mapped with precision. Its patterns line up with models that treat the early universe as a fluid supporting waves. Peaks and troughs in that map correspond to compressions and rarefactions, to places where gravity gathers and pressure resists. The match is not perfect, because nothing living or dead is perfect, but the resonance is strong enough to feel like a chord. He considers how remarkable it is that instruments built by hands can read a weather report older than dust. He offers himself one more invitation. To imagine, consider a vast, dark auditorium. No seats, no walls, just blackness and a stage the size of everything. A baton lifts, no one holds it, and the first and only note is struck. It rings and rings as the hall expands, the pitch lowering, the volume dimming, the harmonics fading, into a whisper. Then the lights, stars, will one day rise, and the audience will mistake the stage for the whole. He smiles in the near dark of the room, content not to correct the error. The first note still persists in the distance between. The lights, sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He repeats them once more, like a lullaby for a cosmos that never sleeps. In the sky, a map of soft, ancient snow. In stone, the future promise of mountains condensed from gas and time. In ocean, the sound that once rolled through everything. In silence, the space where thought can stretch. In memory, the rings left. Behind when motion pauses, he rests with the final unhurried thought. What if the universe is not only expanding, but remembering, holding its first darkness like a seed within every later brightness? He does not answer. He breathes. The night remains a listening place. He drifts with the afterglow's hush still in his ears, and finds, not long after the first transparency, a brightness too loud for its youth. In the young sky, scarcely a few 100 million years old, lanterns roar, quasars, compact hearts burning with borrowed light, already crowned by black holes as heavy as 1 billion suns. The numbers arrive as steady as rain. Redshifts greater than 7, epochs when the first galaxies scarcely learn their names, and yet at their centers sleepless engines already spin. He lets the thought settle like silt. Monsters, too early, sitting where nurseries should be. A grounding detail steadies the drift. Accretion shines. Gas falling toward a dense center heats and glows, and when the center is a black hole, the glow becomes a beacon across the universe. The balance between gravity's pull and radiation's push defines a pace, a limit called Eddington, beyond which inflow should be blown back. Under such a clock, to grow a seed of a few hundred solar masses into 1 billion within the first 1 billion years demands nearly continuous, efficient feeding, or seeds that begin unnaturally large. The puzzle stands like stone at low tide, stubborn, barnacled, ungiving, sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He touches each word in turn. The sky carries the quasar's blue-shifted roar, thinned by the great expansion until it arrives as gentler light. Stone suggests weight, the impossible density inside an event horizon where mass packs so tight that space folds. The ocean is the feeding disk, a storm of gas circling, splashing photons outward like sea spray from a black whirlpool. Silence is the horizon itself, beyond which information does not return. Memory is the fossil of that light, crossing billions of years to become a whisper on a detector. He imagines a first star collapsing, one of the early giants built from nearly pure hydrogen and helium, population 3, in the language of textbooks. Living, fast, dying hard, leaving a black seed of perhaps 100 suns. He imagines many such seeds born in small halos of dark matter, each one tugging on the others like stones in a pocket. Mergers happen, mass adds to mass, the river deepens. But the arithmetic still resists. Time is short. So he imagines another path, a direct collapse, where a pristine cloud fails to fragment, where starlight never forms and the gas falls inward in a single, shivering plunge. A seed emerges already heavy, perhaps 100,000 suns, ready to grow into a city center instead of a hamlet. The image turns slow and circular. He sees a black pond cut by an invisible sink at its middle. Leaves, gas clouds, spin inward, heated by friction, shredded by tides, lighting up as they die. The rim glows brighter than any single star, a ring of day in the night. Around this ring a young galaxy swarms. Newborn stars, dust, supernova winds, streams of cold inflow from the cosmic web. The black hole does not sit apart, it sits inside. A weather system. Sometimes the storm feeds it, sometimes the storm starves it. Who teaches gravity to hurry here? Perhaps traffic patterns in the early web channel fuel like rivers into a bay. Perhaps the geometry itself conspires. He sets down another steadying note. Super Eddington episodes may be possible under the right cloaks. If the inflowing gas is thick and traps its own radiation, if the shape of the funnel directs light away, from where matter falls, growth can outrun the simple clock. For a time. Theories live here like lighthouses on a fog bank, seen, then unseen, but their beams suggest paths. He resists conclusions. He prefers the quiet pleasure of many maybes. He invites himself to imagine walking a coastline where waves run backward, racing seaward faster than they should, pulled by a distant storm. In the young universe, he considers, the coastline is a halo, the waves are gas streams, and the storm is gravity pooled at the center. Currents carve channels, pebbles rattle. The shore remakes itself with each passing surge. He listens for the slow roll of pebbles in his mind and hears, beneath it, the faint mechanical hum of a feeding disk. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He repeats them again to braid rhythm. In the sky, he holds a quasar spectrum where broad emission lines blur into wings, gas whipped near light speed by a gravity well. In stone, he remembers that Earth carries zircons older than continents. Even here, within a quiet rock, there is precedent for toughness and speed, crystals cooling in a violent youth. The ocean repeats as image and mechanism, viscosity, turbulence, spiral density waves, a chemistry, all heat and motion. Silence becomes the event horizon's soft boundary, not an edge but a threshold. Memory is the long, cool travel of photons to a small sensor trembling in the night. Another angle approaches, mergers. Young galaxies collide the way clouds collide in spring, their stars mostly passing like strangers in a crowd while their gas meets, compresses, shocks, forms new stars, and flows toward the centers. If, too, black seeds ride within colliding galaxies, they may spiral inward and merge, their union stitched by a gravitational wave the size of a city of light. He pictures this as two eddies joining in a river, the new whirl larger, deeper, more certain of its pull. The river does not explain itself, it simply continues. He wonders, still gentle, do early black holes teach their galaxies, or do galaxies teach their holes? Correlations in the modern universe whisper a relationship, bulge mass and black hole mass swaying together like dancers who learn each other's steps by long practice. But in youth, perhaps the lesson begins in chaos, instruction shouted over, wind, each partner improvising. He does not decide. He lets the dance continue beyond thought. A quieter thought sits down beside him. Feedback. When the central engine blazes, it can push back on its host, driving winds, heating gas, quenching starbirth for a while. He imagines a black lighthouse whose beam scours the harbor, calming waves not by comfort but by force. Later, when the lamp dims, the harbor fills again, growth in fits, cities in pulses. The early cosmos may breathe not only in expansion, but in these local inhalations and exhalations. He adds one more measured detail, soft as chalk. Surveys now find accreting black holes in the first billion years with masses of hundreds of millions. Of suns, sometimes more, their light filtered by intergalactic hydrogen still partially neutral. The reionization era glows irregularly, patchy as dawn behind torn clouds. Each bright engine clears a bubble. Many bubbles overlap. The night thins. The image is simple. Frost melts where porch lamps warm the air, and in time the lawn is free, though shadows persist. He offers a last invitation to imagine. Consider a tide pool at the foot of a black cliff. In its still surface, a whirl forms and pulls stray foam inward. The pool is young. The cliff is older. The ocean beyond is older. Still, a gull's shadow passes and does not change the water. But far offshore, unseen, a swell rolls and breaks a bar, sending new water toward the pool, filling it, turning the whirl stronger. Imagine, quietly, that the cosmos is this coastline in every direction, tributaries and inlets and bars, and that the black cliffs are the early holes, absorbing, shining, quieting, and awakening their waters by turns. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He lets the words slow. Sky, a lamp too bright for its age. Stone, a weight so intense it curves a path for light. Ocean, the inflow, the outflow, the mist of radiated heat. Silence, the interior from which no rumor returns. Memory, the light that escapes anyway, which is enough to keep the question alive. Who teaches gravity to hurry? Perhaps the lesson is already written in the first ripples, amplified by a universe tuned to make structure fast. Perhaps seeds fall, large from clouds that never become stars. Perhaps a handful of clocks run hot for a while, outracing the rules by geometry alone. He does not choose. He watches the distant lanterns dim into the long corridor of time and lets the sound of their names fade like andante notes in a great, breathing hall. He follows the brightness inward until it thins into pattern, a lace of night stretched between lanterns. The universe does not scatter its lights at random, it braids them. Across distances that dwarf any map he can hold, matter threads itself into filaments and sheets, leaving caverns of near emptiness between. He lingers with the image, a black window touched by cold, and frost arriving in branching paths, choosing, angles without a ruler, finding itself. A grounding detail steadies his drift. Redshift surveys, three-dimensional maps made by measuring how much a galaxy's light is stretched, reveal a vast web. Clusters at the knots, filaments as highways, walls like long drifts of stars, and voids spanning tens of megaparsecs where only a few faint galaxies walk. Simulations that let dark matter and gas fall under gravity's pull reproduce the same geometry. First sheets, then filaments, then nodes. What begins as small unevenness grows into scaffolding. He imagines the cosmic web as an inverted river, delta, not silt laid upon water, but water, gas and dark matter, gathering along channels carved by probability. In his mind's eye, he leans close to a winter window and watches frost bloom from a seed, branching and branching again, a repetition that feels like thought becoming geometry. Each branch is a filament. Each crossing is a knot of galaxies. where starbirth flares and cools like campfires on a dark plain. Another detail sets a small anchor. Much of the universe's ordinary matter does not live in stars but in the spaces between. Thin, warm, hot streams and sheets stretched along filaments like barely visible rivers. Observers find it indirectly, by how it absorbs background light, by the murmur of faint X-rays, by the way galaxies align as if pulled by hairline strings. Weak lensing, gravity's soft fingerprint on background shapes, traces those strings too, mapping mass even when it does not shine. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The words return to Pace's breath. Sky as loom, stone as weight, ocean as flow, silence as room, memory as the pattern itself. He lets a question open like a hand. Might structure emerge the way frost finds a window, without a guiding sketch, with only temperature, moisture, a surface, and a few simple branching rules? In cosmology, gravity plays the role of the temperature difference. Expansion plays the role of the cooling pane. Tiny initial variations are the first crystals. The result is not pre-designed, and yet arrives with a familiar beauty, a handful of quiet rules and no more. He remembers that not all strands carry equal traffic. Some filaments are thick as mountain passes, channeling gas and galaxies into rich clusters, engines that hum with shocks, mergers, and radio halos. Other filaments are hair-fine, little more than statistical leanings in where dwarfs prefer to live. The web is airy, a scaffolding that hints rather than insists, leaving room for great hollows to float. Those voids, for all their emptiness, are not errors. They share the design, the places where silence is allowed to take shape. He invites himself to imagine standing inside a void. No hum of neighbors, no city of light nearby, only a few scattered dwarfs like small far boats. The sky appears less crowded, more exact. The Milky Way would be a rumor if it appears at all. Gravity's tug is weaker here, not absent. The way wind can be weak and still comb a field. Over long time, any wandering stone, any small galaxy, slides toward the filaments as a drop of dew slides along spider silk, pulled by geometry rather than intention. He turns the image and sees rivers. Gas streams down filaments into cluster basins, heating as it falls, lighting as it shocks. Galaxies ride those currents like logs in snowmelt, sometimes bumping, sometimes passing cleanly, sometimes grinding to a halt at the knot where tides from many directions disagree. If he listens carefully, he hears the sound of it, not with ears but with metaphor, a distant whir under dark sky, constant and indifferent. A quiet fact offers a foothold. The same mathematics that predicts the first sheets, the Zeldovich picture of collapse, says gravity initially cares most about one direction, then two, then three. First a slab forms as matter compresses along one axis, then a line as it compresses along a second, then a knot as all three axes yield. This staged choreography explains why sheets give way to filaments which feed the nodes. He finds comfort in the sequence, a simple grammar spoken by mass. He cannot help another, soft question. If life arises in pockets along the strands, does the web influence more than motion? Does it sculpt the tempo of culture by pacing encounters, setting the odds of collisions, mixing or isolating the sparks? He does not answer. The cosmos offers no survey, only suggestion. Still, the notion hangs like a lantern over water. In clustered knots, meetings are frequent. In voids, long silences fall. What histories does spacing write? He returns to Earth with a light touch. Frost on a pane. The branching of a fern. Lightning searching paths through air. River networks growing toward the sea. Brains establishing. Highways of signal. He sees in these earthly forms not proof, only rhyme. the universe seeming fond of compromises between flow and resistance, between chance and rule. Filaments appear where traffic is invited by geometry. The web is a habit, of nature at many scales, the habit of finding paths. He offers one last invitation to imagine. Place a fingertip on cold glass and feel warmth clear a small circle. Then watch as the frost grows again at the edges in delicate spears. Place a mind into the night and feel curiosity clear a circle of understanding. Then watch as mystery returns at the rim in delicate questions. Consider that the web that should tangle instead guides, keeping the night navigable, giving travelers a few roads to follow across an otherwise trackless dark. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He lets the words slow until they nearly stop. In the sky, rivers of night meet in cities of light. In stone, gravity's promise becomes form. In the ocean, current chooses channel. In silence, voids breathe. In memory, frost remains on the window after morning, its pattern evaporated but not forgotten. Might structure emerge the way frost finds a window? He does not insist. He watches the lattice extend beyond thought, a patient design appearing where no designer stands, and he lets the image hold him the way a web holds dew. Without pressure, with only the quiet agreement between thread and drop and dawn. He follows the lattice until it opens into hollows, vast rooms where almost nothing gathers. The lights thin. The highways of galaxies pull back like tides, and the night becomes a plain without landmarks. These are voids, great, low-density basins between the filaments, expanding a little faster than their surroundings, the way a soap bubble swells between stronger films. He lingers with the image. An ocean without wind, level and dark, where even the moon seems to forget to rise. What does emptiness keep to itself? A grounding detail steadies the drift. Surveys chart regions tens to hundreds of millions of light-years, across with far fewer galaxies than average. One famous hollow, the Bootes Void, stretches as though a lantern were lifted and found no dust dancing in its beam. Maps reveal that such voids fill most of the universe by volume, not as mistakes, but as the quiet lengths between louder phrases. Galaxies prefer the edges where flows meet. Inside, only a few late boats drift. Blue dwarfs, thin disks, gas-rich, and solitary, evolving without many encounters. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The words move like slow oars. Sky thins until it feels like a held breath. Stone becomes rare, its weight exiled to the margins. Ocean lies flat, currentless. Silence develops shape. Memory keeps faint footprints, peculiar velocities pointing outward, trajectories bent away, from the emptiness like reeds leaning from a center of calm. He imagines the physics with soft hands. In an underdense region, gravity's tug is weaker. The space between objects yields more easily to the general expansion. Boundaries stiffen. Into gentle ridges, the filaments, and the hollow grows rounder with time, like a bowl settling under its own slight weight. Small voids merge into larger ones. A void-in-void process, bubbles joining into broad lakes, while voids crushed by busy neighborhoods, void in cloud, fade, their identities softened by crowding. The choreography is patient and unhurried, a long exhale inside the universe's longer breath. A second grounding note arrives like chalk on slate. Photons crossing a changing hollow can leave as slightly different photons, their energy adjusted by the evolving gravitational well. The integrated Sachs-Wolf effect, a faint weathering of the cosmic afterglow by present-day landscape. Observers search for cold or warm thumbprints where supervoids and superclusters sit. Sometimes a pattern appears. Sometimes the noise erases the hint. The result stays delicate, as if the sky resists giving up its secrets quickly. He watches. The image widen. At the center of a deep void, a patient galaxy turns slow circles, its disk thin, its arms unscuffed by neighbors. Star birth proceeds in murmurs, not fireworks. Metals, those ashes of earlier stars, stay few, preserved from dilution by crowds. There is time for clouds to collapse without being hurried by passing shocks, time for spirals to remain delicate, time for gas to keep its cool. He senses a temperament here, not isolation as lack, but a different grammar of becoming. He lets a question float like pollen. If geography writes tempo, does a long quiet educate a world in a different key? Nodes and clusters, encounters stir, shears twist, orbits tangle, and change writes in bold strokes. In voids, maybe change writes with a pencil, erasing little, redrafting rarely. What histories belong to places that almost never collide? Do questions grow long there, or do answers stay short? He does not judge one superior. He rests inside. The thought as one rests inside shade. Sky. Stone. Ocean. Silence. Memory. He touches them again to set rhythm. In the sky, sparse constellations where neighboring galaxies seldom crowd the frame. In stone, halos less massive, crosswinds fewer. In ocean, an edgeless pond whose surface wears no ripples. In silence, the sensation of a room so large that footsteps refuse to echo. In memory, a faint outward drift recorded in the motions of dwarfs like a field of grass leaning away from the meadow's hollow. Another grounding detail lifts like a small gull. Flow fields around voids reveal coherent motions. Galaxies slide off the hollow's back toward the walls where gravity speaks more loudly. In maps of peculiar velocity, motion beyond simple expansion, the pattern appears as a wide, gentle divergence, a starless breeze. Even our home sits near a dim basin, the so-called local void, its presence inferred by the way nearby galaxies seem to recoil from one side and collect toward a distant attractor on the other. The image comforts. Even the familiar neighborhood lives at the edge of a silence. He invites himself to imagine standing on a night shore of thought, looking out across a lake so still the stars do not wobble. Imagine a boat in that lake. Alone. Galaxy. Its wake vanishes almost as soon as it forms. No other hulls pass to rock it. The lantern on its bow reflects once, twice, and then the mirror holds. Would stargazing from such a galaxy feel empty or exacting? Would the few visible companions read as loneliness or clarity? He lets the listener decide, without urgency, the way a hand decides where to rest on a quiet table. He returns to the web to understand the hollow. Voids are not neglect, they are outcome. Start with tiny ripples in a nearly uniform field. Let gravity amplify the overdense patches. As they thicken, underdense patches must thin. The universe likes contrast. Walls sharpen, and the spaces between them learn the art of retreat. In simulations, the process looks like bread rising, bubbles defining the loaf's soft architecture. In space, the loaf is the night, and the bubbles are not air but the absence of it. A negative sculpture. He lets the ocean image deepen. In weather without wind, concentration flattens. Algae do not gather. Waves do not break. Light penetrates. Farther, and the abyss holds its own private blue. What lives there tends toward the slow and the spare, the feathery and the patient. He is not claiming the void holds such creatures, only borrowing the mood to feel its spaciousness. A place can teach pace, sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The invocation returns, the words now almost whispers. Sky, a dome that does not throb with sirens. Stone, the rare island rising from a calm sea. Ocean, glass. Silence, a presence. Memory, a ledger with long lines left blank on purpose. Another question rises softly. If emptiness expands a little, faster, does it age differently? Not in the strict currency of time, which keeps its rate, but in the way events accumulate. Fewer interactions, fewer jolts, fewer sudden rewrites. Does a deep void teach resilience by denying the drama that forces quick adaptation, or does it teach fragility by leaving structures untested? He lets both possibilities glimmer and pass like twin fish in clear water. He offers a final invitation to imagine. Drift to the middle of a great hollow and lie on your back under the thin sky. Count the few island lights. Feel the floor of space. Widen beneath you. Not falling, only breathing. Sense that there is no crowd to press you, no schedule that insists. Let the mind become as low density as the room. Thoughts farther apart, each one granted the grace of its entire shape. Imagine that emptiness is not the opposite of something, but a way something rests. He lets the section dim on a held note. Void regions are not errors to be filled. They are part of the music that makes the loud parts meaningful. Between filaments, the universe practices spaciousness. Oceans without wind are still oceans. Rooms without furniture are still rooms. In the hollows of the night, galaxies trail their hands in the dark water and leave almost no ripples, and the dark water, being generous, keeps their secrets. He leaves the hollow rooms and comes upon islands that seem made of breath. They are galaxies, but only barely, ghost-soft, wide as cities, lit as faintly as fog under a street lamp. Their outlines stretch like chalk on night's blackboard, and yet the chalk barely touches. In photographs tuned for darkness, they appear, suddenly, as if someone has adjusted a dimmer and let a submerged shoreline emerge. How can fog learn to orbit? A grounding detail steadies the image. Observers call them ultra-diffuse galaxies, systems with sizes comparable to the Milky Way's disk, but with 1,000th to 100th of its starlight, central surface brightness fainter than roughly 24 magnitudes per square arc-second. Many are first mapped in a rich cluster like Coma, their cotton shapes revealed by instruments built for faint things, a telephoto array of small lenses, dragonfly-eyed, that drinks the dim. Spectra and star counts suggest some hold surprisingly populous families of globular clusters for their meager light. Others move with the slow confidence of heavy halos. Still others seem more fragile, puffed up rather than anchored. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The 5 words return like beadwork on a quiet string. Sky carries the news that visibility is not presence, that a thing can be large and barely seen. Stone stands for mass, the deep interior gravity that may or may not sit beneath the haze. Ocean is the diffuse field of stars, eddies and edgeless, pools of starlight thinned by time and tides. Silence arrives as the spaces between stars widen. Memory is the faint wash of old populations, red and tired, recalling star formation that once mattered and then slowed to a whisper. He lingers with a cluster image. Imagine a great city of galaxies where traffic never quite stops. Coma, Perseus, Virgo, lanterns dense, tides crossing, hot gas filling the streets between. Along the avenues of that city float these pale barges, drifting close to the curbs, stretched by tides, their outer regions feathered by encounters too gentle to smash and too steady to ignore. The stars that remain trace low surface densities and long scale lengths. The shapes look like the ghosts of once fuller disks, or like dwarves taught to breathe out until their ribs show. Another grounding note sits down beside him. Formation ideas bloom like small hypotheses on a winter pane. Some say high-spin halos, dark. Matter scaffolds that rotate with unusual angular momentum can host extended, lightly populated disks, size purchased by spin rather than by star count. Others propose repeated feedback from early star birth, winds, supernovae, and radiation press gas outward, puffing the distribution of stars until the surface brightness thins. In crowded neighborhoods, tides and harassment, encounters that stir without fully merging, may stretch and soften the stellar map. The catalog likely holds more than one story. He asks a question softly, as if not to startle the light. Are these failed giants, massive halos that never converted much gas into stars, or are they overstretched dwarfs, small systems, expanded by wind and tide? The phrase, failed Milky Way, holds a glamour he resists. The truth seems plural, a drawer of possible lives. Some ultra-diffuse galaxies move as if heavy. Their globular clusters orbit with speeds that imply deep wells. Others drift as if their stones are few. The fog may hide bedrock in some cases and only water in others. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He repeats the words to keep time. In sky, he sees the necessity of patience. Faint maps require slow exposures, persistent eyes, nights without. Moon. In stone, he senses how much of a galaxy's story is not visible. Mass measuring itself by motion rather than by shine. In ocean, he dwells on the usefulness of eddies, how feedback can circulate energy through a system, smoothing density peaks. In silence, he hears low interactions. These systems often lack the bright disturbances of recent mergers. In memory, he traces old stars that glow as embers rather than flame. He imagines standing on a shore within one of these islands. On a world in such a galaxy, the night would not crowd. Constellations would feel airy, distances between bright stars yawn wide, and the local band, the analog of his Milky Way, would be a faint gauze stretched hardly brighter than the darkness itself. The sky would be honest and spare. If he waits, a globular cluster might rise like a small, salt-white blossom, a compact bouquet in a field of almost nothing. He wonders, not to insist, but to soothe. Does such a sky breed a different patience? Are stories told more slowly where the ceiling is less busy? He sets a small anchor in the numbers. Effective radii of several kiloparsecs are common. Central brightnesses sink beyond the usual thresholds of survey plates. Star formation histories often suggest early activity followed by long quiet. Gas fractions vary. Some field ultra-diffuse galaxies keep cold reserves and small recent flickers. Of birth. Many cluster cousins are quenched, their fuel stripped by the hot medium or by motion through it. Even the globular populations become riddles. Some UDGs host dozens of these dense, ancient clusters. Others host few, as if the seeds that usually accompany mass forgot to fall. He sees tidework everywhere. In clusters, a galaxy moving through hot plasma can be ram pressure stripped, its gas blown back like a scarf in wind, leaving light to fade and disks to grow transparent. Gentle harassment, long-lived gravitational nudges from many neighbors, can heat stellar orbits, puffing a cold disk into a warmer, thicker one. Tides can lower a threshold, letting small galaxies grow visibly wider without adding much light. He pictures chalk lines rubbed with the side of a hand, edges going soft, a drawing preserved as atmosphere rather than as bone. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The rhythm returns, softer. In sky, he places a telephoto lattice under the stars, lenses like facets of an insect's eye, tuned not to brilliance but to breath. In stone, he places the uncertain mass budget. Do motions stand taller than light? In ocean, he places the notion of low-tide galaxies. Shorelines moved outward, water shallowed. In silence, he places the truth that low-surface brightness is a kind of quiet that instruments must learn to hear. In memory, he places the notion that even faint Things keep ledgers, metallicity, age, dynamics, all whispering their small sums. He invites a further imagining, slow and simple. Consider a library where most pages are blank. The book is still heavy, the cover is still wide, the spine is long. On each page only a few sentences appear, written in thin ink. The story is there, but one reads it sideways between spaces. An ultra-diffuse galaxy feels like that book. The blankness is not failure, it is format. The sentences, clusters, old red stars, slow orbits, carry more meaning because they are surrounded by white. Another quiet question leans close. If visibility and importance decouple, if a galaxy can be large and architecturally significant in a cluster's dynamics while remaining almost invisible, how many other structures have moved him without announcing themselves? Do histories of the cosmos also include chapters with only a few lines per page, their influence carried in geometry rather than in brilliance? He does not answer. He watches the fog move on its rails. A final grounding touch. Some ultra-diffuse galaxies live in the field, not only in clusters. Some show spiral hints. Some carry gas and modest star formation. Some look like stretched, smudges with no detail at all. The category is a room, not a single chair. He finds ease in that variety. Nature likes families of solutions more than lone exceptions. He lets the section thin toward quiet. Fog that learns to orbit is still fog, and yet over billions of years it keeps its lane, circles its cluster, counts its old stars, and allows the universe to practice a different kind of architecture. One where size does not guarantee brightness, where mass does not always announce itself, where chalk lines draw cities that only patient eyes can find. The night makes room for these ghost-soft places. He makes room too, and rests there a moment, reading the faint script until the page looks blank again. He walks from the ghost-soft islands into stranger coves where light seems to have slipped its anchor. A galaxy drifts there, pale and wide, yet the shadow it should cast, the deep invisible weight beneath, looks thin, as if a body forgets its mass at noon. The night is used to scaffolds. Most galaxies ride dark halos, quiet keels that steady the luminous hull, but a few systems whisper otherwise. Their motions come in small, the bass line softens. The song of gravity plays mostly in treble. A grounding detail steadies his step. In ordinary disks, rotation curves stay flat where Newton would let them fall, and in dim dwarfs the random speeds of stars remain high where starlight thins, signs of deep, unseen wells. Yet in a handful of galaxies, the numbers refuse habit. In one diffuse system, the globular clusters wander with such low dispersion that the total mass inferred roughly matches the stars alone. Elsewhere, a gas-rich dwarf shows a gentle rotation, curve, quiet as a pond under evening, sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He lets the 5 words return like beads. Sky is the field where the surprise appears. Stone is the expected ballast, the dark foundation beneath every harbor. Ocean is the kinematic water, rotations and eddies that betray depth by pace. Silence is absence that still shapes. Memory is the trail of earlier weather, encounters, feedback, stripping that might account for what remains. He imagines a shoreline after a storm. The dunes stand, but the heavy driftwood is gone. Only seaweed and shells remain. Perhaps some galaxies become like that. Luminous matter left perched while a passing tide removes the darker ballast. Tidal stripping acts from the outside in. The loosely bound halo thins first, the tighter stellar core endures. A close pass with a neighbor or the long abrasion of a cluster's gravity can peel away the shadow and leave a bright remnant whose motions look unburdened. Another note steadies the thought. There exist tidal dwarf galaxies, condensations of torn gas spun from interacting disks. Born from the outskirts of larger galaxies rather than from new dark halos, they are expected to be poor in dark matter from birth, like kites made from leftover sails with no keel beneath. Their existence softens the surprise. Not every luminous island must ride deep, invisible stone. Some really can be made mostly of starlight and gas, at least for a while. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The rhythm returns to smooth his pace. In sky, he holds faint smudges near bigger hosts, edges frayed, outer light feathered by tides. In stone, he thinks of mass-to-light ratios, quiet fractions that tell whether weight exceeds shine. In ocean, he listens to hydrogen lines leaning, with speed, a watery script that turns motion into measure. In silence, he hears the debates. Distance revised, inclination uncertain, tracers few. In memory, he keeps notes of faint streams in their halos, signs of old tides. He wonders softly, if a galaxy can lose its shadow and persist, what is the minimum a city of stars needs to stay a city? How little anchoring can still hold an oval against the universe's long breath? The question seeks not a number, but a feeling, the difference between a flock that holds and a flock that scatters. He imagines standing on a plain at noon with no shade at his feet. The sun is high, the ground is bright. He looks down and finds only light. He takes a step and feels the earth solid anyway. Confidence in such a world would grow not from seeing a dark twin on the ground, but from feeling a quiet persistence of footing. A galaxy with little dark matter may be like that. No silhouette in the data, yet a lived stability for a while, held by geometry and the small gravity that remains. He returns to the instruments with patience. Velocity dispersions in star clusters offer one window. In gas-rich dwarfs, rotation curves traced by the 21-centimeter line offer another. Distances matter. A farther system is larger and heavier than a nearer twin, and an error reshapes the ledger. Inclination matters too. A disk seen to face on hides true speed. Even the orbits of tracers, whether they wander evenly or favor one lane, tip the sums. Another thread weaves through. In clusters, ram pressure can peel gas from a moving galaxy, while tides heat stellar orbits and whittle halos from the outside. In calmer fields, repeated bursts of star formation can pump energy into central matter, subtly puffing densities and lowering apparent pulls. Feedback as a sculptor that carves by breathing. Between these sculptings, a few systems may briefly resemble places where darkness forgot to gather, even if the forgetting is temporary. He considers whispers at the edge. Perhaps modified gravity could mimic missing or present shadows at low accelerations, the way a reed yields under a light wind. He does not insist. The thought sits beside the others like another pebble on the cairn. More often, he suspects, familiar physics plus a particular history suffice. A close companion, a past collision, a gas wind in a cluster, each changing. How much shadow a galaxy carries now. A small, human question returns. When he looks for meaning, how often does he search the shadow rather than the light? If the cosmos can build a few bright rooms with spare furniture, perhaps understanding sometimes asks him to study what is missing as carefully as what remains. He offers one last invitation to imagine. Picture a paper lantern with a wire frame. In most, the unseen wire is stiff and strong. The paper only shows where light collects. Now imagine a lantern with thin wire, or with pieces missing. The paper still exists, ruffled and luminous, but it responds to every draft. It breathes with the room. Watch it tremble, not in fear, but in sensitivity. A few galaxies may be lanterns, like this. Beautiful because they are vulnerable to the smallest weather. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The words fall to whispers. In stone, the expected shadow thins. In silence, debate remains patient and kind. In memory, a close pass long ago keeps tugging even now. Can absence be an architect? Perhaps subtraction sculpts edges, reveals ribs, and clarifies lines the way low tide shows a shoreline's true bones. Perhaps the universe keeps a few bright rooms where the furniture is spare on purpose. He does not demand an answer. He watches the faint smudges drift, lanterns with light paper and light wire, and lets their delicacy teach him how quietly a galaxy can still be a galaxy. He leaves the lanterns with thin shadows and wanders inward, toward crowded rooms of ancient light. Here, in globular clusters, spherical swarms older than mountains, stars pack close, hundreds of thousands to millions cupped within a space only dozens of light years across. The population glows mostly amber and red. Elders poised along the giant branch, their main sequence long since peeled back to a pale thread. And yet, within these elderly crowds, a few points burn unexpectedly blue, as if fresh sparks rise from cooled coals. They look too young for the company they keep, too bright for the calendar that governs everything around them. He lingers with the simple image, a blue flame in a bowl of old embers. A grounding detail steadies the drift. On a cluster's color magnitude diagram, most stars obey age. The long line of the main sequence climbs and then bends away at the turnoff, the place where a star of that mass exhausts core hydrogen in a system 10 or 12 billion years old. Blue stragglers sit above and to the left of that turnoff. Hotter, brighter, apparently more massive than the cluster should allow. The paradox softens if mass has been added late. Two routes are often named, collisions and mergers in the dense, core that stitch two small stars into one heavier star, or quiet mass transfer in long-lived binaries where an aging companion swells and spills to a neighbor that grows young again. He does not choose among them. He lets both possibilities stand like two paths through the same grove. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The 5 words return to slow the breath. Sky is a bowl pouring starlight thick as milk. Stone is gravity's architecture, the deep potential well that gathers the swarm and presses encounters toward the center. Ocean is the sea of orbits, eddies and close passes, tides raised by neighbors. Silence is the soft anonymity of stars without names, a crowd breathing together. Memory is the diagram itself, a fossil of evolution that blue points seem to rewrite. He leans toward the core and imagines density as weather. Inward of the half-light radius, the mean spacing narrows. Random motions stir like bees in a shaken comb. Here, gravitational focusing enlarges the cross-section for contact. Near misses curve into embraces, and embraces become mergers. A collision need not be violent. Even a grazing kiss can exchange envelopes, stir helium back into the heart, and send a newborn swimmer gliding along the main sequence where only the young belong. Outside the core, where encounters are rarer, binaries take over the task. Over years that outlast empires, one partner swells, spills across the shared bridge, and the neighbor, quietly fattened, shifts blueward, youth by donation rather than by impact. Another quiet anchor sits down beside him. Radial distributions often betray the balance. An excess of blue stragglers in a tight core hints at collisional birth, while another shoulder in the outskirts points to long-lived binaries that have drifted outward. Observers map them with careful photometry, then count against the density profile and the fraction of binaries inferred from eclipses and subtle wobbles. No single pattern fits all clusters. Some cores glitter with blue sparks, others wear halos of them, a necklace at the rim. The family is plural. The story refuses one verb: sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He repeats them, letting cadence thrum. In the sky, the cluster hangs like a dandelion clock, a sphere of seeds against black. In stone, the potential well keeps the seeds from drifting away. In ocean, relaxation tides push heavier things inward and lighter things out. Mass. Segregation whose span is shorter than the universe and longer than a life. In silence, the individual is lost and then found by light alone. In memory, the turn-off point waits like a posted date the whole crowd respects, except for a few who have learned another rule. He invites a question to sit without haste. What? Does it mean to look young in an old place? The physics speaks plainly. Fresh fuel, reheated cores, envelopes reset, but the mood suggests something else, that age in crowded systems is collective and a few lives are rewritten by proximity. Does community bend time? Does a crowd make rare resurrections likely, not by intention, but by mere nearness? He imagines, gently, a world circling a sun inside such a swarm. Night would not be dark. The sky would carry 1,000 silver grains, some bright enough to throw soft shadows across the ground. A blue straggler would rise like a small torch among embers, its spectrum cutting whiter than the rest. He asks without urgency, what stories are told under such a ceiling? Do elders point to the blue ones as omens of luck or reminders of tides? Is patience easier with so many witnesses? The invitation is light as breath. Imagine that sky and choose what the brightness means. A small ledger of numbers returns to Earth the drifting thought. Typical core densities in these clusters can reach thousands of suns per cubic parsec. Velocity dispersions measure a few to 10 kilometers per second. Core collapse clusters show cusped brightness profiles where the chance of contact climbs. Relaxation sculpts the interior, and binaries, hard ones, grow harder by encounters, acting as thermostats that keep the core from imploding entirely. Against this background, the rare blue points make quiet sense. They are accidents made probable by crowding, exceptions invited by the very architecture that holds the cluster together. He lets the image turn like a tide. In one telling, two. Stars brush and become one. The newborn spinning fast, helium mixed deep, surface light sharpened to blue. In another, an unseen companion swells and spills a pale river across the Lagrange bridge. The accretor brightens and slides to the left. On the diagram, a second youth paid for by a partner's thinning. Sometimes a third body intrudes and rearranges the pair. One star ejected to the dark, one orbit tightened, so that transfer waits until the time is right. The stories rhyme without needing to agree. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory, the mantra, passes again. In sky, he sees the Hertzsprung-Russell landscape as a coast, with the blue stragglers standing like tide pools seaward of the normal beach. In stone, he feels the cluster's mass tilt the field, so flows converge. In ocean, he pictures streams of probability carrying pairs together, then apart, then together again. In silence, he hears the unspoken treaty that happens when three bodies meet. One leaves lighter, two remain closer. In memory, the diagram holds both the rule and the exception evenly. He lets another question bloom like a dim flower. If aging can be reset by exchange, if proximity can pour new fuel into an old core, does complexity elsewhere also borrow time by sharing? Do ecosystems, cultures, or ideas gain second lives when their parts collide gently, transferring something essential? He does not push the analogy past comfort. He lets it rest like pollen on a sleeve. A final grounding touch settles like dusk. Proper motion studies disentangle cluster members from foreground and background, securing the census. Ultraviolet imaging highlights the hot, clean signatures of the blue cohort. Spectroscopy reads their spins and compositions, sometimes finding rapid rotation and the chemical fingerprints of mass transfer. The evidence is not monolithic. The blue family holds many accents. some fast, some slow, some spun by mergers, some fed by steady hands. Variety is not noise here. It is the shape of truth when truth has more than one doorway. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He says them once more and lets them thin. Sky, a crowded bowl where a few points burn against the rules. Stone, a potential well that sets the pace for encounters. Ocean, a traffic of orbits where tides work as archivists. Silence, the humility of a diagram that permits exceptions without breaking. Memory, an old cluster wearing a few bright mistakes like jewelry. What if youth is not only a date, but an arrangement? Fuel in place, structure renewed by contact. What if the cluster teaches that some clocks, gently handled, can be wound again? He does not chase answers. He watches the blue sparks ride the amber sea and allows the thought to slow the room, the way a small torch in winter seems to lengthen the night while giving it warmth. He follows the cluster's blue sparks and arrives at stranger hearths, stars that have finished burning and yet keep time like clocks. A lighthouse pulses in radio, precise as a metronome. Another ember glows white and small, the spent core of a once yellow sun. Around such remnants, planets circle. It seems wrong, like gardens growing beside a cooled kiln, and yet the orbits hold. What kind of dawn does a relic give? A grounding detail steadies the drift. The first confirmed worlds beyond the sun do not rise around a living star. They reveal themselves in 1992 around a millisecond pulsar, PSR BMI 12-57+12, through minute, variations in pulse arrival times. Each planet tugs on the neutron star, advancing and delaying the beats by microseconds, small fingerprints on the drum. The masses are Earth-like, the orbits compact, the environment harsh. Later, a Jupiter-sized world transits a white dwarf, WD 1856-534, every day and a half, implying migration long after the host shed its outer layers. Elsewhere, around a different white dwarf, fragments of a broken minor planet pass like ash. In a halo, signatures of disintegration written as stuttering dips in light. The dead do not always keep empty company. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He touches the 5 words as if counting breaths. Sky is the chamber where pulses tick, radio and X-ray sweeping like a thin beam in fog. Stone is the condensed matter. At the core, neutron star crust or white dwarf lattice, mass packed into a city-sized sphere or an Earth-sized pearl. Ocean is the space where planets still move, their ellipses whittled small by loss and tide. Silence is the pause between pulses. Memory is the timing residual, the slight early, the slight late that reveals a companion's presence. He imagines the pulsar first. A star collapses, stops as a neutron-rich ball, and turns. Magnetic axes tilt, beams sweep. With each rotation, the beam brushes Earth and instruments count the flickers. Around this metronome, 3 small worlds ride, cinders, or second children. He cannot say which. One story suggests survival. A massive companion is stripped, leaving debris that cools into a disk. From the husk, new planets grow, second-generation stones in a furnace gone quiet. Another story suggests rescue. Pre-existing bodies endure the supernova's violence or are captured later, their orbits hurtable because time is long and crowds are patient. He does not insist. He watches the light keep time and lets both routes remain open lanes. He turns to white dwarfs. A sun like ours swells, reddens, sloughs its outer shells, and leaves a core the size of Earth, hot as the memory of fire. Around. Such a remnant, the habitable zone creeps close, scarcely a millionth of the distance between stars, an orbit of hours or days, an intimacy of tides. The world must arrive there after the swelling, or it would be swallowed. Many paths lead inward. Gravitational nudges from distant companions, the long, slow torque of a disk of debris, chaotic reshuffling as the star's mass drops and aerodynamics at last cease to matter. Sometimes the motion ends in ruin. Rocks pass the Roche limit and crumble into rings. Sometimes a survivor threads the needle and settles into a tight, patient circuit. A cool ember can still be a hearth, sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The words keep rhythm. In sky, the beam's cadence snaps, a metronome someone started long ago and forgot to stop. In stone, number-dense matter remembers pressure. The neutron star's crust stiff as myth, the white dwarf's carbon and oxygen in crystalline hush. In ocean, orbits respond to tides and drag, circularizing, moving inward, settling like boats in a shrinking harbor. In silence, the spaces between pulses feel audible. In memory, a transit with clockwork regularity becomes a metronome of shadow. He offers a soft question in the room's dim. What atmosphere could endure this weather? In a pulsar's court, wind of particles and high-energy light would scour air like sand. Perhaps only worlds with great shields survive, magnetospheres strong, or oceans deep and roofed with ice, life, if any, living under stone. In a white dwarf's embrace, the light is steady but close. Nightside and dayside differ unless winds run fast. Tidal locking is likely, a perpetual afternoon along the terminator. Chemistry can be kind under a small sun if distance is right. The window narrows. As the ember cools, he invites himself to imagine two skies. In the first, under a pulsar, the darkness brightens in a rhythm. Sub-visual radio counting out a beat the bones might almost learn. X-ray flashes faint as eyelashes against high, cold air. The star is not a disk, but a presence that turns, lighthouse somewhere just beyond sight. In the second, under a white dwarf, the sun is a bright, tiny coin, steady, unblinking, casting hard shadows by day and only a thin, starry hush by night. Oceans, if present, gather along the twilight belt, waves slow under the drag of eternal tide. In both skies, the ceiling teaches patience. Another foothold of fact arrives. Around an old pulsar in a globular cluster, M4, an object circles a binary that includes a white dwarf and the neutron star, a planet dubbed Methuselah by newspapers because the system itself is ancient. Age estimates soften and shift, but the mood remains. Planets can share time with the oldest stones. Around some white dwarfs, heavy elements stain the atmosphere, calcium and iron sinking when left alone, implying active accretion of dust from disrupted bodies. Debris is common, rearrangement is the rule. If planets are citizens, they are often returned to the registry after a star's funeral, reissued new addresses, persuaded by gravity's bureaucracy to live closer to the city center, sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He repeats the 5, slower. Sky, a room with two kinds of lamp, flashing and steadfast. Stone, cores that outlast their fuel, caravans of compressed matter. Ocean, migration inward after heat, streams of debris toward tides. Silence, the way pulse trains make silence EIQs, measurable thing. Memory, timing curves and transit ephemerides, lists that glow like rosaries. He lets another question drift. Are these worlds ruins or renewals? Second-generation planets brewed from a fallback disk feel like children born from ash. Survivors shepherded inward feel like refugees granted a small apartment near the furnace that remains. The universe does not moralize either outcome. It allows both, writes both into the archive, and waits. A small poetic image puts itself down, like a stone. He imagines a house whose hearth has gone to coals. The family leaves, the walls breathe winter, and then, much later, someone returns and boils water over the last red heat. Tea steams where a fire once roared. In that quiet kitchen, usefulness persists without blaze. A white dwarfs close. Planet feels like that kettle. A pulsar's world feels like a metronome on the shelf that keeps ticking long after the music ends, marking time for a dancer who never comes back. He offers one more invitation to imagine. Sit on a plane under a tiny white sun and watch a transit, your world briefly crossing, your own sky briefly dimming. Or stand on rock encased in an ice roof and feel the faint shiver of pulses through magnetized air, knowing that above the ice a beam sweeps coldly, precise, indifferent. In both places, let the heart slow until it matches some external cadence, the transit's period, the pulsar's spin, and notice how quickly worry forgets to speak when time arrives as a simple, repeating shape: sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He lets the mantra fade to a hush. Dead suns still host orbits. Lighthouses still mark harbors after storms. Embers still warm hands if hands stand close. What kind of dawn does a relic give? Perhaps one sharpened by contrast, gentle in dose, durable. He does not answer. He watches. The metronome continue. The white coin glow, and the worlds go round, and he rests with the thought that endings sometimes carry small rooms where new mornings fit. He leaves the relic suns and steps into furnaces still burning, where giants circle so close they glow like coals held in tongs. A planet the size of Jupiter, or larger, skims its star in days, not years, locked to the light, presenting one face, forever to the blaze. In maps of the sky, these worlds become a new category. Hot Jupiters, moth-large bodies flying close to the candle. He lingers with the central image. A storm strapped to a brazier. A wind remembering winter while turned toward a sun that never sets. How does a storm survive so near the flame? A grounding detail steadies the hush. The first of these is noticed in the mid-1990s as a wobble in a normal star, its spectrum's lines leaning back and forth by tens of meters per second, too fast and too strong to be an Earth. The orbit repeats in a little over 4 days. More arrive. Periods of 1 to 5 days, distances of only a few hundredths of an astronomical unit, tidal locking expected, day sides heated beyond 2000 Kelvin. Some are inflated, radii larger than models predict, perhaps warmed from within by currents driven in their conductive layers, perhaps kept bloated by constant irradiation from above. A few, the hottest, cross into a regime where molecules split on the day and rejoin at night, chemistry itself breathing with the world's rotation. The facts organize like stones on a beach, each one quiet and correct, all of them together making a path. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He lays the beads out again to slow the breath. Sky is a star filling much of the firmament, its corona, running in white streamers across a hemisphere. Stone is the hidden core, if there is one, a compact center of heavy elements debated by modelers, the anchor inside a gaseous sea. Ocean is the atmosphere itself, an ocean of hydrogen and helium driven by a perpetual thermal tide, jet streams racing eastward at kilometers per second, heat shifted from high noon into late afternoon by the push of wind. Silence is the vacuum, beyond the limb, uncrossed by sound but not by light. Memory is the orbit, nearly circular, tidally engraved, recalling a migration that must have happened long ago. He imagines the path that brings a giant into such nearness. In one telling, while the disk still swirls, the planet trades angular momentum with gas, slipping inward like a bead moving down a string, Disk migration, steady and unsurprising. In another, more dramatic gravity from a distant companion. Tilts and stretches the orbit until, at last, Periastron dives too close. Tides raise bulges, energy is lost, and the orbit circularizes near the star. High eccentricity migration. Migration by chaos followed by quiet. He does not choose. Both stories breathe. Both leave traces. Misaligned spins measured by the way. Starlight's absorption lines skew during transit, sculpted companions, architectures reshaped by a single body's fall. He listens for the weather. On the day side, the Lighthammer's chemistry. Sodium and potassium leave deep imprints in spectra. Metal oxides may absorb and invert the temperature profile, making hot stratospheres that glow like coals higher up. On the night side, the long. Cold encourages recombination in clouds. Silicates condense as dust. Iron rains, droplets and crystals form and sublimate along the terminator, a belt of permanent racing dusk. A few worlds lose mass to the furnace. Their upper atmospheres heat, swell, and stream away into comet-like tails of hydrogen, a slow, bright forgetting traced in ultraviolet. The image grows. A blacksmith's shop in slow motion, shavings of vapor falling off the work. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He repeats them to keep time. In sky, phase curves measured across an orbit show the hotspot offset from the substellar point, wind carrying day into evening. In stone, tidal bulges, lock rotation to seasonlessness, a perpetual noon above one hemisphere, a perpetual midnight above the other. In ocean, an eastward jet circles the globe, a river of air quick as thought. Beneath it, deeper layers move more slowly, perhaps sluggishly heated by currents that turn magnetic fields into warmth. In silence, the star-planet magnetic conversation, crackles in wavelengths no ear can receive. In memory, inflation lingers, a radius larger than expected, a fossil of constant hammering. He lets a question rise like heat shimmer. Can a storm remember winter? In these worlds, every gust is a negotiation between physics and geography, between the iron law of a fixed sun and the fluid law of flow. Some night sides cool by 1,000 degrees or more relative to day. Others carry warmth farther, smudging. The contrast, the planet's mood set by opacity, rotation, drag, and depth. If a world is a bellows, can it be tuned? Can clouds act as memory foam, saving day's heat and releasing it after dusk? He does not hurry the answer. He leaves it soft. He invites himself to imagine the sky of such a place, even if no solid ground exists to stand upon. Picture a gondola floating in the upper air, tethered to instruments that hum in low, careful voices. Above, the star is a white coin larger than any moon, its corona licking outward like wind-pressed grass. Along the horizon runs a permanent line of twilight where clouds pile and disperse, piles of glass sand and metal ash, their shadows racing east. Around the gondola, the air moves with purpose, no breeze but a river, soundless because there is no ear large enough and because the sea of gas is thick and quick. The balloon sways, gentle, a seed head in a flow too massive to fathom. A steady fact returns as ballast. Many hot Jupiters show their star's rotation misaligned with their orbit, axes tilted this way and that, as if a child has rotated the mobile above a crib. The Rossiter-McLaughlin effect measured during transit reveals this skew, a spectral line shifting one way then the other as the planet hides first the approaching and then the receding limb of the star. Some alignments are neat, others are wild. The collection speaks of histories that do not repeat. The narrative refuses a single path. It presents a family album. He turns toward the inflation puzzle and sets it down gently. Ohmic dissipation, the idea that moving ionized winds through a magnetic field can turn motion into heat, sits beside tidal heating from ongoing orbital eccentricity, sits beside the blanket effect of heavy irradiation that slows cooling and contraction. None rules alone. He enjoys the plurality. A world can be warm for more than one reason. A life can be buoyed by more than one current. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. Again, the beads pass. In sky, eclipse measurements, when the planet slips behind the star, reveal day-side spectra, bare emission, a voice even without a surface. In stone, perhaps a compact core of ice and rock sleeps beneath thousands of kilometers of gas. Perhaps not. The data tolerate both. In ocean, eddies shear and break. Jet streams roar like invisible rivers over a canyon with no walls. In silence, the vacuum outside carries only light, and light brings all the news. In memory, a migration from cold birth to hot adulthood writes a biography in misalignment and company left behind. Another question arrives and stays unclaimed. When a giant hurries inward, what becomes of the small worlds farther in? Are they scattered outward, swallowed, or spared? Some systems show no close-in rocky planets near a hot Jupiter. Others hide them far away or not at all. Does the giant clear the kitchen before setting a chair by the stove? He lets the question rest, like a coat over the back of a chair, warm because it was worn recently. He offers one more invitation to imagine. Suppose a probe drifts across the terminator, day's bright edge into night's calm gulf. Watch molecules unmake and remake themselves along that line. On the day, bonds break into atoms. On the night, atoms reunite as if rehearsing creation. Watch the hot spot pass beneath, east of noon, a glowing bruise on the planet's cheek sliding forward with the wind. Feel, if feeling is possible, the slow tug of tides from the star and the continents fall toward a center that is not stone, but pressure, layer upon layer of compressed sky. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He slows the words almost to stillness. Sky, a lamp, too near, too large, too steady. Stone, an anchor suspected more than seen. Ocean, a river of air encircling a world with no continents and no shores. Silence, a physics that does not need witness to be true. Memory, a migration's scar turned into a new normal. How does a storm survive so near the flame? Perhaps by learning a new grammar, eastward rivers, chemical tides, nights that inherit the day. Perhaps by living as a bellows rather than as a breeze. Perhaps by being what a planet is when distance gives way to intimacy. Not a failed world, but a different success. He does not decide. He listens for the racing jets on the other side of sound, watches the tiny dips of transit flatten and rise, and lets the image of a moth-large planet circling a candle-length star rest in the mind's warm, slow air. He leaves the backward skies and finds a horizon with two lamps. Here, dawn may arrive twice. First a small sun lifting, then its companion following, or the two rising hand in hand, braided light slipping across hills in overlapping fans. Shadows fork, cross, and braid back. At noon, if the stars eclipse each other, day itself softens for a moment as if the sky inhales. He lingers with the notion, a world where balance is a duet, not a solo, where the ceiling has two hearts. A grounding detail steadies the image. Observatories watching a close pair of stars, an eclipsing binary, notice extra dimmings that do not belong to star-crossing star. The dips repeat not every few days like the stellar eclipses, but on a longer rhythm. A planet transiting across the combined face, circling both at once. Kepler 16b is an early exemplar, a Saturn mass world tracing a path around two small suns. Later join others, Kepler 34, Kepler 35, Kepler 47 with a family of more than one, and, more recently, a planet flagged by a different spacecraft, its silhouette slipping across a binary's shared glow. Dynamics offer a soft rule. Such worlds remain stable only when they orbit well beyond the pair, roughly a few times the star's separation, far enough that the binary acts like one wobbling center. Inside that radius, chaos waits. Outside it, long patience appears. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The 5 words return to pace his breathing. Sky is a double compass. 2 suns etch 2 arcs, 2 coronas, 2 reflections on water. Stone is the gravitational scaffold formed by 2 masses, a lopsided bowl whose center shifts as the stars revolve. Ocean is the orbital flow where a planet's path encloses a dance, its seasons written not only by tilt and distance but by the star's own circling. Silence is the calm between eclipses, the still air when geometry holds. Memory is the light curve, the ledger of dips, where a planet's passing is tallied beside the star's embrace. He leans close to the mechanics without breaking the spell. In a circumbinary system, the planet feels a sun that is not fixed, but moving. Illumination varies even if distance stays nearly the same. If the 2 stars differ in color or size, the palette of daylight shifts subtly over a month-like beat, warmer when the redder star faces, whiter when the bluer star leads, brightest when both add their disks, dimmer when one slides behind the other. Eclipses carve momentary twilights into noon. Seasons may layer, the long year of the planet around both stars, the shorter inner month of the stars around each other, and perhaps, slowly, precession, an elegant nodding of the planet's orbit, tilting the pattern over decades. Some planets, like one known for its twitchy schedule of appearances, transit for a handful of passages and then vanish from view. For years, geometry alone closing the curtain and then opening it again. He invites himself to imagine standing on a dune at latitudes where both suns climb high. First light begins in the east, pale, a coin just above the line. Another coin follows along a slightly different track. Shadows separate like fingers, painting the ground in stripes that move and merge. Later, as one star covers the other, the air cools a little. Colors tilt. Birds, if any, pause as if misled by a false sunset. Afterward, day brightens again, and the dune wind remembers its earlier pace. The invitation is simple as breath. Picture this sky. Let the body feel the second sunrise in the skin. Another grounding note sits quietly. The stability of a circumbinary orbit has a critical distance, measured in units of the binary's size and eccentricity. Closer than this, resonances tug and unmake. Beyond it, the orbit behaves as if circling a single, slightly wandering mass. Many discovered circumbinary planets live just beyond that threshold, as if migration delivers them to the first safe ledge and leaves them there. Some even sit where the combined light allows surface temperatures that could, in theory, accommodate liquid water, though weather under 2 suns would be its own arithmetic. Day lengths braided by eclipses, cloud feedbacks paced by dual rhythms, wines learning a new rhyme. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He touches the beads again. In sky, 2 halos can appear in thin cloud, 2 pillars at sunset, 2 reflections in a still lake, double signatures of a single source of warmth. In stone, the potential landscape shows 2 wells whose motion makes a changing saddle, an arena where orbits precess and nod. In ocean, the planet's day likely locks to neither sun. Rotation keeps its own counsel while the light above alternates sources. In silence, eclipses fall like blinks, brief interruptions that teach how much brightness matters only when it pauses. In memory, star catalogs carry notes beside certain names. 2 suns, 1 world. He thinks of habitability and lets caution whisper. A habitable zone around two stars is not a ring but a ring that breathes, expanding and contracting, as the pair draw together and apart. If the planet's own orbit is slightly eccentric, the breathing compounds. Clouds might act as governors, saving surplus light in tall reflective towers and giving it back by greenhouse in the dimmer interludes. Oceans, if present, would store heat with their long memories, smoothing the stencil of dual seasons. Photosynthesis under two suns could favor pigments tuned to blended colors. Nights might be shorter or arrive unevenly, or carry a faint afterglow when one sun sets and the other lingers low. Nothing forbids quiet life, only the metronomes multiply. He lets a question loosen with care. Does balance learn a different dance between two hearts of light? He does not press for an answer. Balance on Earth has one drummer, and yet even here the beat is not simple. Under two suns, perhaps resilience becomes an art of layered rhythms, plants learning to open leaves to the composite noon, winged things, timing rest to the eclipse pulse, waters trading currents between alternating winds that rise with alternate dawns. He lets the speculation be gentle, a silk thread between fact and wish. He returns to grounded numbers like stepping stones. In one system, the binary completes a circuit in just under 41 days. The planet's year lasts nearly 300. In another, the planet is Neptune-like and rides outside two sun-like stars that eclipse every few days. A multi-planet. Circumbinary system shows that more than one world can fit the dance. Orbits nested beyond the breathing edge, each holding phase with the inner duet. Transit timing provides the measure. Small shifts in when the dip begins and ends expose the moving stage beneath the passing planet, a choreography written into shadow. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The rhythm returns. In sky, he watches the possibility of noon eclipses, memories for children who learn early that daytime can dim. In stone, he feels the deep, slow persuasion of tides, the stars raising bulges on one another, the binary losing spin to orbit, the planet feeling the long backwash as a slight change in its precession. In ocean, he imagines two glitter paths racing across water at dawn, one bright, one fainter, then crossing and briefly becoming one. In silence, he places the pause when both suns set at nearly the same time, a short night whose suddenness tastes like rain. In memory, he keeps the delicate transit season of a precessing planet. Years of visibility, years of invisibility, like a lighthouse seen only when a far mirror happens to face the coast. He offers one more invitation to imagine. On a high plateau under thin air, he sits and watches both suns approach the horizon on lines that are sisters but not twins. One dips first, the sky warms to peach, then the second touches the ridge and the color shifts to brass. The first returns at false dawn for a moment. No, it is the stars eclipsing, the brighter slipping from behind the dimmer, a small increase that feels like memory more than weather. The plateau holds its cold. He breathes, and the double shadows of a nearby rock merge into one, then divide again. Another question comes and stays undecided. If a mind grows beneath two suns, do metaphors favor pairs? Twin promises, dual truths, the comfort of second chances built into the sky? Or does the constancy of cycle, even in its complexity, teach the same lesson as any dawn, that light returns, and return is its own meaning? He lets the question stand in the air like dust that never quite settles. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He slows the words until they are almost wind. Sky, two voices in a single choir. Stone, a tilting bowl beneath a steady step. Ocean, a long ellipse enclosing a dance. Silence, the momentary hush when one sun hides the other. Memory, the ledger of dips and rises that proves a world can belong. To more than one warmth, circumbinary planets cradle double sunrises. Does balance learn another dance, or is balance always a learning, no matter how many drums keep time? He does not choose. He watches the twin light lean toward evening. The cross-hatched shadows lengthen, and the image of two hearts beating above. One small horizon presses the room into a deeper, more generous calm. He turns from twin dawns and steps into a corridor without lamps. Here, worlds travel alone. No sunrise ties their hours together. No season leans on an orbiting year. These are planets that leave their suns, rogue, free-floating, unmoored, and yet they do not fall. They drift through the galactic night like stones skipping once, twice, then deciding to keep going across a black sea. He lingers with the simple image, a house with its hearth carried inside, the door always open to darkness. Is home a force or a choice? A grounding detail steadies the hush. Such worlds reveal themselves most often by gravity's brief trick, microlensing. A planet passes in front of a distant star. Its mass bends the star's light, and for a few hours or days the star brightens. The planet acting as a lens with no glow of its own. If the event is quick and clean, with no sign of a host star's slower, longer lensing nearby, observers infer a lonely body. Surveys of the bulge and spiral arms, patient as monks, monitoring. Millions of background stars. Collect these flares as if gathering moths from a dark field. The time scales point to masses from Earth-size up through Jupiter's. The counts, uncertain but suggestive, whisper that the galaxy may hold vast numbers of unbound worlds, perhaps as common as stars, or at least not rare. Sky. Stone. Ocean. Silence. Memory. He lays the beads along his breath. Sky is not a ceiling here. It is a latitude and a longitude, a navigation without a fixed pole. Stone is the planet's inward pull, the weight that remains whether or not a star answers. Ocean is heat, internal, radiogenic, tidal if a captured moon remains, circulating like a secret sea beneath and within. Silence is the distance between any lamp and this traveler. Memory is whatever chemistry keeps going after exile. A stove that turns low but does not go out. He lets the mechanics arrive unhurried. How does a world become a wanderer? In one telling, siblings jostle as they grow. A close passage throws one body outward, eccentricity high, and the next encounter kicks it past escape. Planet Scattering writes an eviction notice and signs it with gravity alone. In another, the planet forms far out in the cold and never fully ties its life to a star. A small nudge, passing star, cluster tide, unbinds it early, and it moves away as if the cord were only ever loosely knotted. Perhaps some worlds are born from collapsing clumps without a star, small failures of stardom that choose smaller lives. The galaxy is generous with paths. He imagines the weather of a starless kitchen. If the planet is giant, hydrogen cloaks it deep. Beneath thick air, pressure knits heat into a blanket, and internal warmth, left over from formation, trickle-fed by slow radioactivity, may keep cloud tops above frost. If the world is rocky, ice may seal an ocean. Below the ice, tidal kneading from a companion moon or the slow burn of isotopes can stir water for 1 billion years or more. Some theorists sketch Steppenwolf worlds, wanderers warm enough under heavy hydrogen to keep seas, their surfaces dimly lit by aurora or slow chemistries. He does not insist. He holds the possibilities lightly, like stones in a pocket, each with its own cool weight. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The mantra returns softer. In sky, the Milky Way arcs like a river of frost, brighter than any noon can be on a world with no sun. In stone, gravity remains a faithful script, binding atmosphere to rock, teaching mountains to hold their height. In ocean, heat flows by, conduction and convection, subtle and patient, a tide with no moon unless a moon comes along. In silence, nights do not end. They simply change their stars. In memory, ancient isotopes tick like slow clocks beneath the crust. He sets down another, measured bead. A microlensing light curve rises and falls symmetrically. The peak carries the signature of mass. The duration carries distance and relative speed. To be sure, no host accompanies the lens. Observers look for additional light or a slower tail. Sometimes a faint star is there after all, far enough away that the planet's orbit is enormous, not unbound. Sometimes no anchor appears. Even then, the line blurs. A world might be so distant from a faint host that its year is longer than a human history and might as well be exile. The cosmos cares little for categories. It arranges continuums and asks minds to choose thresholds. He invites himself to imagine walking on such a traveler if a surface exists to carry steps. The sky is a cathedral made of cold. The galaxy pours overhead, not a band, but a city of snow. No direction warms the face more than another. If there is air, the wind is set not by a rising sun but by deep gradients of heat, by the relief of mountains, by occasional lightning that teaches the clouds their own names. If there is an ice roof, its ceiling glows faintly with auroral green, where the interstellar medium brushes the magnetosphere and sings. He lets the listener touch this image gently. A landscape of quiet, a sound of slow water under ice, a confidence in darkness that needs no lamp. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory, again. In sky, navigation becomes geometry. Constellations shift, with the planet's long, straight course around the galactic center. In stone, impact craters record not seasons but encounters with dust and pebbles threading the same arm. In ocean, vents write halos of mineral snow. Bacteria, if any, learn the alphabet of heat. In silence, calendars mark tides of radioactivity rather than dawns. In memory, the planet keeps the composition of the nursery where it formed, a bottled climate carrying its initial salts. Another quiet anchor. Young clusters sometimes host, candidates for free-floating giants, embers that glow in infrared, their ages known from the cluster's clock, their masses read by models of cooling. Outside clusters, cold wanderers grow shy, their light too meager to show. Microlensing and occasional wide-field infrared surveys do the lifting. Estimates shift like sandbanks, but the drift is clear. Unbound worlds are not oddities. They are a population. Some may travel with moons. Some may be caught again by a new star, adopting a second home after a long night. He asks softly, is home a force or a choice? The question bends both ways. Gravity binds. A star holds its court. Yet a world without a star still keeps a climate of some kind, a pace, a chemistry. It can even cultivate seas the way a cave cultivates a climate within a mountain. Stable, unhurried, independent of weather outside. If such a world later drifts near a warm lamp and is captured, does it feel return or arrival? The words are metaphors for stones. He lets the metaphors breathe and then rest. He imagines a ship that never docks but never sinks. The crew learns a calendar by the positions of far beacons, globular clusters and bright giants, passing in slow procession. Festivals take place when a certain cluster sits at zenith. Bedtime follows when a nebula crosses a chimney of rock. The story is gentle, not prescriptive, an invitation to feel how life might measure time when dawn is not an option. A last grounding detail steadies the page. Capture is possible but rare. A star and a planet must trade energy with a third body, another star, another planet, a passing tide, or a dissipative medium like a disk must help. Otherwise, trajectories cross and part like polite strangers. Over billions of years, a few strangers become neighbors anyway. The galaxy's field is big. Patience is bigger. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He slows them until they almost stop. Sky, a long hallway with windows only at the far end where spiral arms curve. Stone, a gravity that answers no one but itself. Ocean, heat held like a candle cupped in two hands. Silence, the rule, not the interval. Memory, a map not of seasons but of roots. He offers one more invitation to imagine. Hold a pebble from a river. Feel its smoothness. Remember the current that once filed it down. Now picture a planet worn by travel, its atmosphere shaped by a stream without banks, its ice layered with dust from different neighborhoods of the galaxy, each stratum a postcard from a constellation. Imagine listening to its inner ocean through the ice. Slow, patient knock of vents, the white noise of bubbles, a geology that speaks in whispers. Let the mind stand there and feel, for a while, that absence of sunrise is not the absence of morning. He lets the section dim like a coal under ash. Rogue worlds drift through the dark like stones across a black sea. Some leave by accident, some by design written in dynamics, some by beginnings that never included a hearth. Home, on such roads, becomes a verb, held by gravity, built by heat, renewed by motion. He does not decide whether home is force or choice. He breathes, and the galaxy above the traveler continues to wheel, faint and enormous, teaching a different kind of day. He steps into a world built from angles, where light lies low forever and noon never arrives. A single star hangs near the horizon and hardly moves. The planet keeps one face to its sun as a tide-kept dancer holds one hand toward a lantern. Dayside a warm mask, nightside a cold mask, and between them a narrow ring of dusk that never ends. Along this rim he imagines cities, not in lines, of stone but in lines of temperature, habit nested where the air is always almost evening. Tidally locked, the world writes its map with light. A grounding detail steadies the hush. Around small red stars, close orbits are gentle enough that a rocky planet can fall into synchronous rotation in geologic short order, millions to hundreds of millions of years, a blink in planetary time. One hemisphere faces the star, one looks away. Yet climate models suggest rescue from extremes. A sufficiently thick atmosphere, moving heat by wind and weather, keeps the nightside air from freezing and the dayside from boiling, while high clouds over the substellar point can reflect light and cool the bright face. Oceans, if present, add their long memory, swinging heat between halves like a slow pendulum. The habitable zone, once drawn as a ring, becomes a belt. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He places the 5 words on the sill and lets them breathe. Sky is a perpetual twilight roof, the star fixed as a low ember. Stone is a continent with 2 moods, sunlit crust warm to the touch, dark crust, brittle and blue with night. Ocean is a long circulation between light and shade, a river that crosses itself. Silence is the set of shadows that never change direction. Memory is the climate held in place by habit, the way vortices return, the way rain lives on one side and snow on the other. He lingers with weather that listens to geometry. From the dayside, air warms, rises, and flows outward aloft. Along the surface, cooler air slides back from the night like a slow tide, closing the loop. Above the bright point, a tower of cloud can bloom, thick anvils reflecting day, shading sea and sand beneath, while along the terminator a permanent line of gold forms where sunbeams glance. On the night side, if the air is thin, carbon dioxide, and water can fall out, frosting the land and building cold traps. With thicker air and oceans, warmth smears wider and the frost retreats to highlands and hollows. He sees an eyeball world in his mind, a bright pupil of open water under the small sun, ringed by a band of cloud and rainfall, encircled by a night of slow, creaking ice. Another small anchor sits down beside him. Some worlds may not be perfectly locked. If orbits are a touch eccentric, a 3-2 spin orbit resonance, like Mercury's, can emerge. Then the star still rises and sets, but calendars are strange, days longer than months. Even so, the theme persists. Light visits small, favors edges, and teaches wind a 2-cell prayer, up at noon that never comes, down at midnight that never leaves. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The words return to keep cadence. In sky, spectra shift to red. An M-dwarf paints daylight as cinnamon and bruise, a color that plants might answer with deeper pigments tuned to long wavelengths. In stone, the ground knits fractures at the line where heat meets cold, thermal tides tugging. Rock with a metronome that never changes. In ocean, gyres fold along the terminator. Warm tongues reach into night as thin rivers under ice. Cold tongues creep toward day as glassy undercurrents. In silence, the wind hums one direction for centuries. In memory, glaciers remember starward, flow, oozing from night to day and raining out as rivers beneath the fixed sun. He invites the listener to imagine walking the ring. To his left, the sky holds stars. To his right, the star sits low and copper. The ground underfoot balances. Frost beads one blade of grass, dew warms the other. Stones are cold on their shadowed faces and warm on their lit ones. Breath ghosts in front and vanishes behind. A village chooses its doorways to face the glow. Windows on the night side open to constellations. Fields lie in stripes, shade crops and sun crops, alternating like woven cloth. Children learn north and south by the color of the sky, not by a pole. A grounding caution moves like a quiet hand across the map. Red dwarfs often flare. Their temper can be quick. Their ultraviolet bursts hard on air. Yet even here the ledger stays soft. Thick atmospheres, oceans, magnetic fields, and chemistry's resilience all offer shelter. Ozone can be broken and remade. Life, if it learns this beat, might burrow, reef, or bloom in cycles tuned to flares, the way tide pool creatures tune to tide. He does not insist that life is present. He simply notices that the physics does not forbid patience. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. Again, the beads. In sky, aurora can braid the night side in silent curtains where stellar wind meets field, green veils moving like sleep across black ice. In stone, volcanoes, if any, write their own local summers, bright islands under the fixed star and red fountains under the fixed night. In ocean, monsoons are not seasons but positions. Rains fall forever beneath the substellar cloud, snows drift forever opposite, and rivers run permanently from frost to fire. In silence, circadian clocks must learn a different anchor. Perhaps temperature pulses, perhaps currents, perhaps the faint daily shimmer of high-altitude waves. In memory, growth rings in wood might show not years, but long climate beats, subtle shifts as the orbit precesses and the star climbs a finger-width higher or lower over centuries. He lets a question settle without demand. What lives in a place? That is always almost night. The answer could be mosses that drink the slant light, black-leaved vines that prefer the terminator's gray, drifting mats riding the line like rafts. It could be pale crustaceans under the night-side ice, exchanging chemical news along warm fissures, never seeing the copper star but feeling its tug in electric weather. It could be minds that tell time by wind and not by shadow, that place their temples where the star sits most exactly on the ridge. He does not choose. He lets the dusk make room. He imagines cities that move like herders, as continents wander, and the star's declination shifts by tiny degrees. Villages pack and drift to keep the evening comfortable. Portable streets, rope bridges on sleds, foundations that remember how to be unbuilt. Or perhaps cities learn to be belts, their roads running with the Terminator, looping the planet as a single, prayer-like clause. Lamps are few. The star is lamp enough. Windows face both ways, one onto the red coin, one onto the black salt. Of stars. Another measured note. Even in perpetual dusk, weather keeps surprises. Gravity waves ripple from day's storms into night's stillness. Jets form along the equator, drifting the substellar hotspot a little east. Mountains cast wind wakes that freeze into standing eddies. Towns built in their lee where gusts soften. On sea, the glitter path of the star lies fixed, a burnished stripe in one direction only, and sailors steer by it as by a road. Rain never falls in some places and never stops in others. He feels the fairness of such a symmetry. Balance here is not half and half, but a long compromise stitched by motion. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He slows the words. Sky, copper, low, patient. Stone, two-toned, warm-cold, cracked like glazed ceramic. Ocean, a belt of swell under, a belt of cloud. Silence. Not absence, but steady tone. Memory. A map written once and read forever until the orbit nods and the belt migrates a mile. He offers one more invitation to imagine. Sit atop a ridge that marks the median of comfort. Boots in frost, face in sun. Listen to the river whose source is a glacier behind and whose mouth is a mist ahead. Watch the cloud crown above the substellar sea, a mountain of vapor that forever reigns. Hear the night crack softly in the distance where ice moves. Let the star sit at the same angle long enough that the pulse of your own blood becomes the clock. He lets the section fade like a lamp cupped in the hand. Tidally locked worlds draw habitable lines of dusk, not rings of compromise, but belts of belonging where light and dark negotiate a home. Perpetual evening teaches a gentle grammar. Winds that close their loops, seas that remember for continents, stones that hold two temperatures at once. What lives here? Perhaps whatever learns to love edges, roots finding the slant, eyes that welcome a long twilight, minds that build their calendars from wind. He does not decide. He watches the star remain a low ember, the horizon a thread, and he rests with the idea that comfort can be a line. He walks from mineral weather into a colder hall where the ground itself is a lid. The surface looks dead, white, fractured, quiet as porcelain, and yet beneath it the ocean moves. Here, water hides under stone, salt remembers warmth in the dark, and tides work where no moonlight enters. The image gathers slowly. A sea roofed by ice, a world that keeps its heart under glass. What songs do buried seas teach their moons? Grounding detail steadies the hush. Around some icy bodies, a magnetic field turns like a question. When a changing external field washes past, Jupiter's in the case of Europa, the moon responds with an induced signal as if a conductive layer lies inside. A salty global ocean fits the data. Gravity, too, weighs in. Subtle wobbles, tiny librations, and the way mass clumps hint at a shell decoupled from a deeper fluid. Elsewhere, chemistry kneels at a microscope. Grains rich in salts and soda on a crater's floor, bright patches of sodium carbonates that look like the residue of evaporated brine. The evidence does not shout. It accumulates like frost, one thin layer over another until the shape beneath appears. Sky, stone. Ocean, silence. Memory. He places the 5 words along the sill. Sky is barely present here, a thin blue line above. Ice. Stone is the lid, kilometers thick, cracked, buckled, scribed with ridges like writing. Ocean is the secret beneath, a black plain moved by heat and tide. Silence is the muting power of ice, a roof that makes thunder sound like breath. Memory is salt held in water, carrying the story of minerals it has touched, the temperatures it has known, the rocks it has dissolved. He lingers with Europa's face, though he does not force a name. A sphere crossed by double ridges that run for hundreds of kilometers, flanked by bands of jumbled blocks, a chaos terrain as if a plate of ice shattered, tilted, and froze in place. The pattern suggests that the shell floats on something that yields. Where fractures open, brines may well upward, paint streaks, and refreeze. Tidal flexing, gravity's kneading from a giant planet and sturdy neighbors, feeds heat from within, like a slow, hand-working dough. Beneath the shell, pressure deepens until water grows strange. High-pressure ice, crystalline yet denser than liquid, may stack at the bottom like bedrock above the real bedrock. Between rock and liquid, under high pressure and near vents, chemistry can practice speech, hydrogen, silica, sulfides, and the possibility that rock and water, pressed together, produce food. Another bead sits down gently. An ocean may also slumber inside a larger moon, one with its own magnetic voice and layered interior, rock and water and ice in nested spheres. The shell there thickens and thins with latitude. High above the equator, frost fields stretch for days. Deep below, briny layers slide like quiet weather. Farther out, a world with haze and lakes of methane on the surface likely hides a deeper water ammonia ocean beneath crusts of different ice, a cold brine sweetened with antifreeze that lowers the freezing point and lengthens time. Even a dwarf planet between Mars and Jupiter keeps secrets. Bright salt flats gleam in a basin where brine once reached the surface, and an interior that remembers water whispers through gravity like a murmur through walls. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He repeats them to keep the breath even. In sky, auroras may flutter where charged particles meet a tenuous atmosphere, thin curtains above a blank plane. In stone, fractures map stress like crow's feet around a constant eye. In ocean, tides rise against ice ceilings and fall back, stirring nutrients the way wind stirs lakes on Earth. In silence, the great hum of tides becomes a slow creak only sensors hear. In memory, deposits on the surface, salts, organics, clays, spell. Words the ocean tries to send upward. He imagines the heat sources, laying them out like cobbles. Radiogenic isotopes inside rock cores tick down and warm, a steady candle. Tidal kneading pumps additional warmth into the ice and the water, especially in worlds locked in orbital resonances that keep their eccentricity from going quiet. Where rock meets water, serpentinization, olivine altered by hot fluids, can free hydrogen, a simple food. Hydrothermal vents could spew silica-rich grains and metal-laced smoke into the dark. None of this is promise. It is the architecture of maybe, energy, liquid, chemistry, and time. A question rises, gentle as a bubble. If light never arrives, can life still learn a grammar? On Earth, in abyssal black, communities gather around vents. Bacteria eat chemicals. Larger bodies house bacteria. The chain climbs by warmth and mineral breath rather than by sunlight. In a buried ocean, such grammars might also be possible. Cells could migrate with slow currents, hitchhike on ice crystals, accumulate in brine lenses between layers. Or nothing could happen at all. Water might be only water. He does not rush either story toward triumph. He lets both float in the dark. He invites the listener to imagine standing on the roof of such a sea. Picture a plain of blue-white ice, ridged and rutted, the horizon close and low. Underfoot, the ground groans very softly now and then. A violin, note out of reach. A crack, newly opened, exhales a breath that smells of salt and stone, then seals. Far away, a plume, thin as thought, briefly paints the sky in fine crystals that fall like slow snow. He places a palm on the ice and holds still until the faintest tremor arrives, like the purr of an enormous sleeping animal. Perhaps it is only the ice adjusting. Perhaps it is the ocean turning in its sleep. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. Again the words pass. In sky, stars burn hard and cold, but their news hardly reaches the sea below. In stone, the lid teaches patience to anything that waits. In ocean, currents carry messages from vents to ceilings and back, very slowly, like priests at opposite ends of a nave exchanging candles. In silence, pressure makes speech economical. In memory, trace molecules caught in ice veins record the chemistry of yesterday. He turns toward other far coasts. A moon, captured long ago and tugged into a backward orbit, may still hide brine between. Its shattered crust and its core, warmth left from capture and ongoing kneading. Another body in the outer, dark, heart-shaped basin turned toward the sky, shows tectonics that suggest a global ocean refusing to freeze solid, perhaps swollen with ammonia. The lack of certain compressional scars hints that expansion from freezing did not proceed. Liquid remained to take the pressure, an inference so quiet it could be missed if one does not look long. He sets a final small anchor in the data. Spacecraft. Passing above these worlds weigh them as they go. Tiny changes in speed, tracked by Doppler shifts as narrow as thread, reveal mass arranged in shells rather than solids. Radar pings the surface and listens for echoes from layers below. Thermal cameras measure warm freckles at fractures where deeper heat concentrates. Even a slight wobble in the way a moon turns, its libration amplitude larger than a solid body would allow, whispers of a sliding shell over liquid. None of this replaces a hand in the water. All of it points. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He slows the beads until they almost stop. Sky, a minor participant. Stone, a veil. Ocean, the event. Silence, a condition, not a mood. Memory, salt. Asks one more quiet question and leaves it open on the table. If the universe prefers hidden seas to open ones, if buried oceans are common wherever rock and ice can hold hands and heat can persist, does life prefer privacy? On worlds lit by suns, evolution learns to stand and gaze. In worlds lit by vents, perhaps evolution learns to listen. Which is more frequent, a blue marble with clouds or a black ocean under glass? He does not know. He finds comfort in not knowing. He offers an invitation to imagine that is little more than breath. Lower a microphone into that dark sea and wait. Hear the snow of minerals hitting the ice ceiling. Hear distant fizz at a fissure, a fall of warm brine through cold layers. Hear perhaps a clicking that is only ice shifting, or perhaps chemistry, practicing rhythm. When the recorder rises again, salt clings to its metal like glittering pollen. The surface wind says nothing. The stars look on without comment. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He says them once more, softer than before. Oceans beneath frozen stone move in patient circles. Tides swell against ceilings. Heat smolders in rock. Salts carry archives. The lid remains. What songs do buried seas teach their moons? Perhaps lullabies in pressures and ions, sung so slowly that listening must become a kind of sleep. He does not answer. He places his palm again on the ice in his mind and feels, or imagines he feels, a small, obedient pulse from below. He steps from Diamond Rain into a corridor where visitors pass, without knocking. A streak appears, not on schedule, not from any familiar family of comets or asteroids, and the orbit refuses to close. The path is open-ended, a curve that never returns, a hyperbola that begins far away and ends farther still. A stranger from another sun arrives, says almost nothing, and keeps walking. He lingers with the image. A leaf blown through a cathedral, carrying the scent of a forest no one here has seen. How does a traveler carry a map made only of departure? A grounding detail steadies the hush. In one autumn, a survey telescope sweeps a routine lane and notes a fast-moving point that does not belong to the usual cloud. The object is small, hundreds of meters at most, and unusually faint, but its path tells the story. An eccentricity greater than 1, a speed too high for the sun to claim. The brightness flickers in a pattern that suggests a long, thin shape or a flat shard tumbling end over end. No coma sprouts in the images, no tail unfurls, and yet a tiny non-gravitational push nudges the trajectory, something like outgassing, though gas is not seen. In another season, a different stranger arrives, this one wrapped in a definite coma, shedding dust and gas like any comet, only its speed and open orbit confess an origin beyond the solar family. 2 guests, 2 moods, one silent and angular, one bright and ordinary in its activity, both unbound. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He sets the 5 words down in order. Sky is the dome that notices motion against the fixed stars and recognizes difference. Stone is the visitor's body. Ice and rock, rubble or shard, holding its own small gravity. Ocean is interstellar space itself, a very thin sea through which the traveler has drifted for tens or hundreds of millions of years. Silence is the shortness of the visit. Weeks of good light, then gone. Memory is the orbit recorded, the light, curves logged, the faint spectra filed, the only souvenirs of a guest without a forwarding address. He imagines the first visitor, no name necessary, in profile. It tumbles like a chip of something once larger, dark and red-brown from space weathering. Its brightness rises and falls by a factor of many as it turns, as though long and thin, or wide and flat, or both at once depending on how it spins. The small push from sunlight or sublimation edges it outward on a track just different enough from pure gravity to trouble easy explanation. Perhaps a veil of invisible gas whispers from its surface. Hydrogen or nitrogen or ECO that leaves little trace. Perhaps it is airy and porous, light as balsa, so that radiation pressure can matter. Perhaps it is a slab of frozen something rare, shaved from a far-off surface by ancient impacts and then set loose. He does not solve it. He holds the mystery like a cool coin between fingers and lets it be coin-like, precise and undeciphered. The second guest feels familiar. Its dust and gas peel away under sunlight. A tail lifts, spectra show the usual carbon-bearing volatiles, and the nucleus glows with the confidence of a small, active comet. Only the hyperbola marks it as foreign, a cousin from another village, wearing the same clothes. Where the first whispers, the second speaks in a dialect astronomers know. Together they teach patience. The sample size is 2, and 2 is not a law. The family of interstellar bodies is probably as various as the families of stars that eject them. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He repeats the mantra to pace the breath. In sky, he hears survey telescopes rake the darkness with nightly metronome, searching for faint drifters among a million fixed points. In stone, he feels fractures written by a long cold, joints and planes set by impacts forgotten. In ocean, he pictures the slow drift between suns, a path bent by each star's tide, but claimed by none. In silence, he notices how quickly the brightness window closes, The visitor sinks into twilight, then into glare, then into the sun, and the chance is over. In memory, he considers the handful of spectra and the light curve like a cardiogram, thin lines speaking for a whole body. He lets a quiet question lean closer. How many such leaves blow through the cathedral each year, unseen? Estimates vary, like dunes and wind, but even a modest count suggests a galaxy thick with cast-offs, fragments of planetesimals flung outward when worlds were young, shards of crust shaved by collisions and placed on escape. If every newborn system throws stones into the street, then interstellar space is a long, slow hail. He imagines that hail as a sparse rain of stories, each grain a story from an alien workshop. He invites the listener to imagine watching the first guest with a small telescope from a backyard. It is just a speck, sliding faster than nearby stars, passing through a faint triangle of lights that will not remember it tomorrow. No tail, no glow, only motion. The map in his hand cannot predict it, because the map in his hand is of orbits that return. This one is a moving straight line bent only gently by the sun, and then away. He feels a small human tug, admiration for the purity of a visit that asks nothing, gives little, and changes the room merely by passing through. Another grounding bead arrives, cool and exact. The visitor's orbits point back toward general directions in the sky, but their long travels smear the trail. They do not retain the velocity fingerprint of one particular star. Their inclinations and speeds fit an origin in the random, hot sea of stellar motions, not a parade from a single nursery. Meanwhile, hints arise that some meteors hitting Earth may also come in too fast for solar-bound orbits, their paths and speeds suggestive of foreign birth, though measurements are young and debates are careful. The idea sits like a lantern in fog, plausible, not yet proof. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory, again the beads. In sky, the coming generation of wide-field eyes promises deeper, faster sweeps, more guests noticed, more brief interviews. In stone, sample return dreams begin to sketch themselves in the margins. Sails that catch up, darts that taste, flybys that sniff. In ocean, he imagines the interstellar medium not empty but textured. Clouds and bubbles, magnetic lanes, through which these small bodies pass and polish. In silence, he hears the void's own weather, a grain sputtering under cosmic rays, reddening its skin, softening its reflectivity. In memory, he imagines each visitor's surface as a palimpsest written by two homes, the child world that made it and the long night that kept it. He asks another gentle question. If a body carries chemistry from another sun, and if a hand one day holds a chip of that body, will the chip's isotopes carry an accent, oxygen ratios, carbon ratios, recognizably foreign? Would it smell of a different snow? He does not press. He lets the question stand, its answer a future's quiet work. He offers an invitation to imagine the traveler's births. In a crowded, newborn system, giant planets migrate and jostle. Planetesimals swing too close and are hurled outward. Most fall back into cold, distant reservoirs. Some strike a last, fortunate angle and escape. They leave with the velocity their star bestows, then spend their ages under the slow drift of galactic tides. A few pass within a few astronomical units of other suns and are warmed for days, weeks. Some outgas and shine. Some remain inert, stone carrying the taste of a sea that dried long ago. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He slows them to a near whisper. Sky. A dark door opening for a moment. Stone. A speck that refuses a leash. Ocean. The space between homes, patient as wood grain. Silence. The modesty of a guest that will not stay. Memory. A trail of numbers, epochs, magnitudes, velocities. thin as pencil marks, and yet enough. He imagines a future night when alarms ring softly at an observatory. Another interstellar visitor inbound, brighter, slower, better placed. A small fleet rises, sails that do not need fuel, cameras that drink starlight more than power, a sampler that can taste without grabbing. The encounter lasts an hour. It becomes a book. But he lets the fantasy remain translucent, not a promise, only a way to feel the kindness of looking closely at what passes through. One more question comes and is left open like a window. Are we the only cathedral that feels draft when the door opens? Perhaps other minds, circling other suns, watch our stones pass through their rooms and ask similar questions in languages that breathe differently. If so, then interstellar space is not empty at all. It is a hallway where strangers occasionally share a glance. No one speaks. Everyone remembers. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He ends the mantra with care. A visitor arrives from other suns and slips away. No names cling, no claims are made. The map is written in departure, the story told by arc. He does not chase. He watches the speck go on, the hyperbola widen, the night close behind, and he rests with the sense that the universe includes not only homes, but also roads, and that the roads are generous. He listens for weather with no air and hears a far thunder cross the floor. The table trembles not at all. The window glass stays calm, and yet, briefly, every distance in the room lengthens and shortens by less than the width of a proton, as if space itself inhales and exhales. Once, a chirp rises through silence. Low, then higher, then gone. Ripples in space's quiet. What does distance sound like when it moves? A grounding detail steadies the hush. 2 long tunnels lie at right angles in the countryside, each 4 kilometers end to end, each emptied of air and filled with light. Laser beams pace back and forth between mirrors hung like pendulums upon pendulums, so free that the earth can sigh beneath them and they will hardly know. When a gravitational wave passes, one arm grows a hair longer as the other grows a hair shorter. The beams return out of step by a fraction, and the interference pattern changes by 1 part in 10 to the 21st. Strain as small as a rumor in stone. Instruments mark the moment. First in September of a past year when 2 heavy black holes fold into one, and again after that as pairs merge far away. The sound is data. The music is real. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He places the 5 words on the sill and lets them breathe. Sky is not the dome above, but the fabric that carries stars and him alike, now seen to sway. Stone is the mirror, polished and suspended, unwilling to twitch unless space itself commands. Ocean is the field of ripples passing through everything, at once, long swells from distant storms in curved space-time. Silence is the room between the notes, the vacuum in which the chirp appears. Memory is the recording, a file that holds a brief, rising whistle like a bird that no one has ever heard and everyone now knows. He imagines the first signal. 2 compact shadows circle each other in a black room, their orbits shrinking as they spend energy not in light but in pattern, ripples that run outward faster than any rumor. The frequency climbs, the amplitude rises, the dance tightens, the last few orbits race by in a handful of tenths of seconds, the horizons kiss, a ring-down hums as the new single shadow settles into a shape it cannot help but prefer. On a screen, the trace looks like a fishhook tipped up, a spiral of time turning into a point along a frequency line. He hears the chirp in his head. Woo-oo. Gone. A bell rung with no sound. Another measured anchor arrives like chalk on slate. Distances and masses fall out of the curve. A 30 solar mass pair from a time when the universe is younger. A heavier set. A lighter one. Then a duet of neutron stars whose slower, higher-pitched, Song lasts for nearly a minute, ending with a flicker of gamma rays seen a heartbeat later. Telescopes on Earth and in orbit swing to a galaxy 200 million light-years away. A soft, red transient brightens and fades over days, the light of our process elements being born, though that story will wait for its own room. The link matters. The wave and the light, together, set a standard candle without candles, a ruler without markings. The cosmos offers another way to count. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. Again the beads pass. In sky, ripples from coalescences arrive. From every quarter, a rain of brief histories. In stone, coatings on mirrors are quieted by cryogenic dreams and careful engineering. Thermal jostling hushed so the wave can be heard. In ocean, the strain moves through his bones without harm, through mountains without fracture, through the earth as if the globe is air. In silence, the instrument's vaults hum with vacuum pumps and then stand still, listening. In memory, catalogs thicken. Events stamped with dates, masses, spins, distances, names that are only coordinates because anything more would be too small. He asks the question softly to avoid startling the quiet. When distance moves, what part of him moves with it? He knows the answer in physics. Everything does together. But the mood of the question is simple. If every ruler stretches and every heartbeat in the world is briefly longer and shorter by the same fractional amount, then motion becomes an agreement, not a displacement. The wave is not something that pushes him. It is a different way of saying where he is. He invites the listener to imagine standing in the corner of one of these listening halls. Light echoes between mirrors along the long tubes but produces no glare. The beams are hidden, tucked into steel and vacuum. Somewhere, a control room breathes in soft screens. Outside, fields and trees keep their seasons. A far storm, in a galaxy whose name will never be learned, turns, tightens, and ends, and for a blink of time the hall shrinks in one direction and expands in the other by less than the width of a proton. Nothing visible moves. A trace on a monitor lifts and falls like the throat of a sleeping animal. He breathes in time with something he cannot feel. A second anchor rests beside him. Not only high notes arrive. Across years, arrays of millisecond pulsars, clocks set in the sky, become a galaxy-scale interferometer, timing the ticks of dozens of lighthouses to tens of nanoseconds. A common, low rumble appears in the residuals, then the telltale angular correlation among the clocks. Nearby pairs share the same extra wiggle. Pairs at right angles share none. Opposite pairs share a mirrored wiggle. Evidence for a background. Heat of nanohertz waves, likely from the slow courtship of supermassive black hole binaries in distant galactic centers, emerges as a map of timing noise that is not noise. The ocean of ripples is not empty. It is full of swells too long for the 4-kilometer halls to hear and perfect for clocks that live between stars. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The rhythm holds. In sky, a choir of pulsars keeps time with the patience of mountains. In stone, domes on Earth and longer arms to come, underground, underwater, in space, prepare to listen wider and quieter. In ocean, frequencies divide like habitats. Kilohertz, chirps of stellar corpses. Millihertz murmurs that a future space interferometer will catch where white dwarfs pair off like sleepy dancers. Nanohertz hum that timing arrays now map. In silence, each band waits for its instrument. In memory, the universe writes a symphony that no single ear can catch, and he is content with one movement. He leans toward the craft. Mirrors hang on glass, fibers so thin they look like strands of light. Seismic noise is quieted by long, careful stages of isolation. Laser power is raised to convert shot noise into precision without chasing heat. Feedback loops hold the cavities steady. the world, must be kept out, trucks, surf, microsysms, a tree falling a mile away. Even the quantum becomes a negotiation. Squeezed light pushed into the arms to trade uncertainty in one quadrature for certainty in another, uncertainty bent to serve a measurement as narrow as a reed. He asks another small question, then lets it go as one lets go of a kite string to watch it fly. If the universe is elastic enough to ring, what strikes it most often? Black hole unions, neutron stars joining, white dwarfs tugging, cosmic strings that perhaps never were. He does not vote. He is pleased that a category called Other remains open on the form, a line waiting for an event that sends a shape no one expects. He invites a second imagining. Lie on a granite slab in summer and feel a freight train pass 10 miles away through bones you did not know could listen. Now, remove the air, the ground, the train, and keep only geometry. Far away, two masses learn they are one. The slab under your back and the distance to the pine and the long reach to the horizon all change by the same tiny fraction. For a breath, you and the pine and the hill are placed in new relation by a visitor who never touches any of you. Then, the room returns to itself, precisely because, in truth, it never left. The mind, having leaned to hear, refuses to forget. A gentle fact returns to hold the thread. From the waveforms, spins can be read, aligned, misaligned, and thus histories can be inferred. Pairs born together from massive stars, pairs made later when strangers meet in crowded clusters. Some remnants kick, some settle, some ring longer than others. The census reveals populations. Heavy black holes from quiet, low metallicity nurseries, lighter ones from later, richer skies, and the odd ones with eccentric paths hinting at violent neighborhoods. Each detection is small and complete. The pattern grows without hurrying. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He slows the beads. In sky, nothing appears, and yet everything has been described differently. In stone, a mirror holds its posture like a monk. In ocean, space's own tide keeps time. In silence, the chirp writes a smile into a thin line of pixels. In memory, files are kept with care, because someday someone will ask a new question of an old wave, and the answer will already be there. He lets one last question settle without seeking a reply. Are these ripples the universe reminding itself that even emptiness is not empty, that geometry has moods? If so, the moods are not anger, or joy but cadence and ring, properties of a drum that no one built. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps listening is the work and the reward. He allows the section to dim like a bell whose tone lingers after the bell has stopped. Gravitational waves pass like far thunder through bone and stone. They do not rattle shelves. They do not sway. Grass. They touch only the measure by which shelf and grass are spaced. What does distance sound like when it moves? He does not answer. He hears the faintest upward chirp in a quiet he keeps wider now, and he rests, feeling the room remain, and knowing that remaining is not always the same as staying still. He follows. The upward chirp to its bright echo in light and finds a bruise of color spreading across a modest galaxy's edge. Two shadows, compact, cold, unimaginably dense, have spent eons circling each other, and then, at last, they touch. In that instant, space rings, and elsewhere a small patch of sky changes from nothing to something. First blue-white, then rose, then rust, then ash. A kilonova, a brief flower of heavy elements, opens and closes. He lingers with the image, gold poured from colliding shadows, scarcity born in a single, soft wound. Can scarcity be born in a single, bright wound? A grounding detail steadies the hush. A pair of neutron stars merges. Interferometers on Earth hear the inspiral as a rising tone. Seconds later, satellites notice a faint flash of high-energy light. Short gamma-ray burst arriving slightly after the wave. Telescopes of every size swing toward a nearby galaxy. Over hours, a new point appears and begins to redden. Spectra hint at freshly made atoms. Weeks later, lines of a lighter R process. Element, strontium, stand out, the first direct fingerprint. The color change itself turns out to be a physics of opacity. Lanthanides, heavy and complex, block blue light and force the glow to move redward as they dominate. Earlier, a lanthanide-poor component lets a cooler blue rise while it can. The choreography is patient and quick at once. Blue to red, thin to thick, transparent to veiled, all while the light fades like breath on glass. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He lays the beads along the sill. Sky is a new star where no star was, fading the way a bruise fades into the quiet skin around it. Stone is matter pressed past the memory of atoms, crushed to neutrons and then briefly freed into fragments, a spray of nuclei that will become the coins in history's pockets. Ocean is the outflow, winds from the hot accretion disk, jets drilling, through a cocoon, tidal tails torn thin and thrown outward, channels through which ingredients escape. Silence is the gap between the ring in gravity and the rise in light, a pause that teaches patience. Memory is the heavy abundance the universe keeps afterward in crusts in veins, in small bright circles worn against wrists. He leans toward the ingredients without hurrying them. In the first instant after contact, tidal arms fling neutron-rich matter into space. Inside the remnant, whether a hypermassive star that survives for a heartbeat or collapses quickly, neutrinos wash through, changing some neutrons to protons and tuning the electron fraction of the outflows. Material with very low electron fraction makes the heaviest R process, lanthanides and actinides, with opacities that paint the kilonova red. Matter with slightly higher fractions makes lighter R process elements and permits a brief blue. Disk. Wines add their own pages to the story across a slower hour, their composition set by geometry, magnetic stresses, and the remnant's stubbornness. A narrow jet forms in some cases, breaks out, and runs on to power a short burst and a fading afterglow, while a chubbier cocoon carries slower energy for days. None of this is theatrical. It is patient mechanics, density, temperature, neutron, count, time. Another measured anchor sits quietly. Heavy elements need rapid neutron capture, R for rapid nuclei, stepping up a ladder faster than they can beat a decay, then walking back toward stability later. The path runs near the neutron. Drip line, a reach of the chart of nuclides that laboratories visit only by inference and by models. In the kilonova's forge, seed nuclei meet torrents of neutrons. Chains assemble. Magic numbers of neutrons stabilize way stations. Then, as the environment cools, the newborn elements decay, releasing heat that powers the glow. The light that telescopes see is the bookkeeping of decay, a slow tally of energy given back to space. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He repeats them to keep cadence. In sky, photometry follows the color turning, near ultraviolet, bright and quick, near infrared, lingering like embers. In stone, crusts on future worlds will host flecks from such nights, the gold and platinum and rare earths that make tools, sing and circuits hold. In ocean, outflows curl around the merger like rivers around knolls, each with its own temperature and composition. In silence, the absence of a bright supernova shows another route to richness. In memory, the ratios of elements in old stars' atmospheres carry the signatures of ancient forges, some enriched in bursts, others smoothed by many small yields. He asks a question that sets itself down like a coin on a table. Our neutron star, unions enough to account for all the galaxy's heaviness, or do other kitchens contribute? Rare, magnetized supernovae with jets, collapsars whose disks drive neutron-rich winds while a black hole forms. He does not choose a single cook. Enrichment may be a chorus, some neighborhoods seeded by a single bright wound, others by long simmering. Dwarf galaxies, chemically young, sometimes show one star with overloads of europium, as if a single event salted a small town. Spiral disks, older and busier, show averages, as if multiple chefs have taken turns. He invites the listener to imagine watching from a hillside outside, a small town on a quiet world. A new star appears low near a galaxy's fuzz, bright for a night, then softer, then red, then gone, like a coal lifted briefly from a hearth. No sound reaches the hillside, but the town keeps a ledger, dates and brightnesses, a sketch of its color. Years later, someone holds a ring and says, without drama, that the gold once belonged to a night like that, when two invisible stones touched and their meeting gave the sky a blush. The statement is not romantic, it is precise, and the precision deepens the gentleness. Another grounding bead. Neutron star-black hole pairs may also contribute. When the black hole's mouth is small and its spin kind, tides can shred the star before it vanishes, releasing matter and light. When the mouth is wide and the spin unhelpful, the star disappears whole, and no kilonova rises. Selection by geometry writes itself as statistics in catalogs that fill one quiet column at a time. Meanwhile, models of ejecta mass tie brightness to angles and to the stubbornness of matter clinging to itself as gravity insists. Not every collision promises jewelry, enough due to matter. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. Again, the beads pass. In sky, radio afterglows expand as rings inside galaxy dust, mapping the jet's interaction with interstellar medium, a slow arc that becomes a ruler for the event's energy. In stone, he thinks of old meteorites carrying isotopic anomalies, xenon, and neodymium, whose odd ratios whisper of our process ancestors before the sun was born. In ocean, neutrino winds carry not only matter but also information, spectra responding to flavor and flux, a conversation of ghosts. In silence, models argue in a low voice, opacities, nuclear masses beyond reach, transport through thick flows, each debate, a careful kindness. In memory, abundance curves across the periodic table arrange themselves like coastlines, peaks at magic numbers marking where the R process paused to breathe. He wonders softly, does knowing the origin of gold make its shine cooler or warmer? He imagines both answers living side by side, the coolness of precision, lanthanide opacities, beta decay heating rates, next to the warmth of narrative, that a bright wound once lit the outskirts of a quiet galaxy and, long afterward, a speck of that night sits on a wrist. He allows the coexistence to feel ordinary. The world often asks minds to hold two temperatures at once. He offers one more invitation to imagine. Picture the merger's last seconds as a bowl of black water sloshing, faster and faster. Then the bowl is gone, replaced by a single deeper bowl, and a rim of luminous spray leaves in streaks. Some of the spray is clear and cool, blue, some is thick with lanthanides, red. The bowl hums and settles. The spray rides outward into a room already moving with expansion and becomes, grain by grain, the bright, heavy punctuation of future rocks. On some later coast, children gather metallic sand and let it run through their fingers without knowing they are holding a night. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He slows the words until they nearly stop. Sky, a bloom of color that remembers, a ring in gravity. Stone, nuclei stitched too fast and then calmed into wait. Ocean, winds and tails carrying seeds away from a hot, brief center. Silence, the pause between wave and light that teaches how listening works. Memory, a metal that keeps a history long after the light fades. Gold from colliding shadows. Calanave braid, heavy elements from crushed stars and then dim, leaving brightness stored in matter rather than in skies. Can scarcity be born in a single, bright wound? Perhaps scarcity is only concentration, and concentration is only history written quickly. He does not answer. He watches the patch of color fade, sets a small coin in his palm and rests with the sense that some of the room's quiet is older than the room and heavier than its walls. He walks into a cloud that looks like nothing and finds everything. The starlight dims, colors become charcoal and violet. A quiet cold, only a few degrees above absolute zero, takes the room. Dust grains float, small as smoke and hard as stone, and each grain wears a thin glaze of ice. Water, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, methanol, ammonia, layer upon layer like breath frozen on glass. Here, in the dark, chemistry begins to braid itself. He lingers with the image, a loom of cold where molecules weave without hands. Does chemistry dream before life wakes? A grounding detail steadies the hush. In dense molecular cores, regions, with densities of tens to hundreds of thousands of particles per cubic centimeter and temperatures near 10 Kelvin, atoms and simple radicals meet on dust-grain surfaces. Hydrogen, light enough to tunnel through barriers even at these temperatures, migrates and adds itself to waiting partners. Carbon monoxide becomes formaldehyde, then methanol. Nitrogen accepts hydrogen and learns to be ammonia. Cosmic rays thread the cloud and strike ice, making faint ultraviolet glimmers that break bonds and set radicals free. The radicals recombine in new alignments as the ice relaxes. When a young star later warms the neighborhood to a few tens or hundreds of Kelvin, these hot carinos and hot cores exhale the stored inventory, and radio telescopes trace the exhalation line by line. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He sets the 5 words down to pace the breath. Sky is not bright here. It is a velvet that protects small reactions from glare. Stone is the grain itself, a rock speck teaching molecules how to meet by giving them a place to rest. Ocean is the thin film of ice around each grain, a sea only, nanometers deep that still ripples with arrivals and departures. Silence is the low temperature, a hush that slows chaos until pattern can appear. Memory is the mantle, layers of frost recording seasons of chemistry the way tree rings recall rain. He leans toward the simple miracles first. Hydrogen forms from lonely atoms that find each other on a grain, a tiny success that the universe repeats until clouds are full of H2. Carbon and oxygen meet and part, and the parting pieces become carbon monoxide, then stretch toward carbon dioxide with a little help. So little heat exists that motion becomes negotiation, yet quantum tunneling lets the smallest visitor slip from sight to sight. At 10 Kelvin, chemistry proceeds by patience and probability. He imagines the grain as a small plaza at night with travelers drifting in from shadowed alleys and choosing companions by leaning, by chance, by habit. Another anchoring bead sits down gently. In spectra from dark clouds and warm cores, telescopes have read out a catalog that grows with every careful season. Formamide and formic acid, glycolaldehyde, the simplest sugar, methyl isocyanate, a reactive cousin to molecules used by life to stitch chains. Propylene oxide, a chiral molecule, twin-handed and significant because life's hands choose. Even around a small sun-like protostar, glycolinetrial, a seed that can lead toward adenine. In the coma of a comet visited up close, instruments sniff glycine, the simplest amino acid, and phosphorus. Bones and code written in 2 elements at once, along with dozens of other organics. Meteorites that fall to fields on Earth carry amino acids with isotopic ratios that tell of cold birth, not kitchen contamination. He sets these facts down as one sets down cups on a table. Each cup holds a little of the dark's own tea. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The words return. In sky, lines at millimeter and submillimeter wavelengths slice the dimness, rotations of molecules lighting up in the radio with the precision of a tuning fork. In stone, silicate and carbon. Grains act as catalysts by simply being surfaces where the improbable becomes routine. In ocean, thin ice grows and shrinks as gas accretes and sprays, a tide measured in molecules. In silence, the cold allows radicals to meet without running away. Once they join, they stay. In memory, isotopic ratios, deuterium enhanced in certain. Bonds keep the temperature of formation locked in like a date carved very small. He invites the listener to imagine taking a single grain and enlarging it to the size of a hill. Its surface is a landscape of terraces and hollows. Frost glitters in a faint internal night lit only by cosmic rays' slow fireworks. Across the plain, a hydrogen atom hops, by tunneling, by chance, and meets a carbon monoxide traveler. They pause, merge, and become something larger, then wait for another step. Elsewhere, ultraviolet breaks a bond and a radical wanders, leaves a track through the ice only a few angstroms long, finds a partner, and settles. He crouches in thought beside this chemistry and hears nothing. No hiss, no crackle, only the imagined click of a bond forming, a click so small that even silence cannot hear it. A smaller, careful note. The architecture of a young planetary system remembers these clouds. In protoplanetary disks, snow lines mark where water, carbon dioxide, and carbon monoxide condense. Beyond those lines, grains grow sticky with ice and clump faster, seeding planetesimals that carry chemistry with them. As stars warm their disks, ices retreat and reappear like migrating shores, imprinting gradients that later shape atmospheres. Comets and outer asteroids store the early inventory. When they fall inward, whether into young oceans or onto basaltic plains, they deliver fragments of the cloud's dream, the preface to later chapters written in cells. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. Again the beads. In sky, he pictures a dark nebula, Barnard black, against a field of stars, not a silhouette of absence but a womb of reactions. In stone, meteorites split under a laboratory blade reveal veins rich in organics, a geology of molecules grown before geology itself. In ocean, Titan's haze makes tholins, complex tar from simple gases, fall like snow into methane lakes, another cold chemistry rehearsing possibility. In silence, he notes how experiments on Earth, ices laced with simple gases, bathed in ultraviolet inside vacuum chambers, produce amino acids and sugars after gentle warming, hints that cold plus light can write a portion of the alphabet by itself. In memory, catalog lists thicken. Isopropanol in a giant cloud near the galactic center. Ever longer chains in laboratories of sky. He lets a question rise without urgency. If the dark can write ingredients and sometimes even small recipes, how much of life's sentence is drafted before warmth ever enters? Perhaps cloud and comet and disk together compose a prologue, rich and varied, so that when a planet cools and rain falls and rock fractures and tide moves, the words at hand, already, match the verbs the world can conjugate. Perhaps the prologue is only a glossary, useful but insufficient, and the grammar of living arrives only with cycles and membranes and error and correction. He does not choose. He enjoys that both stories feel kind. He imagines a cold core on the brink of star birth. Gravity gathers the center. Temperatures creep up. Ices sublimate. The small plaza of the grain becomes a busy square. Lines in the radio brighten and multiply. A little later, a protostar coughs jets into the cloud. Shocks raise patches from 10 to 100 Kelvin, and new pathways open. Then, as disks shape, chemistry learns a new geometry. Rings where molecules concentrate, gaps where they thin. A chemistry of lanes. He stands within this flow and finds it calming. Nothing hurries, and yet everything advances. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. The cadence returns. In sky, polarization of far infrared light traces magnetic fields that thread the cloud, guiding collapse and the drift of grains like wind shapes dunes. In stone, chiral molecules made in space arrive with small imbalances. Left hands and right hands not equal. Whispers that asymmetry can begin in starlight and continue in biospheres. In ocean, solvents will change, from thin ice on grains to liquid water in ponds, but the motifs remain. Carbon seeking carbon, nitrogen tying knots, phosphorus waiting to move energy. In silence, he hears that the universe is busy where eyes think nothing is. In memory, he holds a fragment of a meteorite in mind and sees not rock, but a library card from a very old branch. He invites one more imagining. Consider a night field, where fog lies low and quiet. Place, at arm's length in thought, a single speck of dust floating in that fog. On that speck, draw a map of a city. Corners where hydrogen tends to turn, streets where CO travels, plazas where radicals might meet. Now let a slow, steady drizzle of ultraviolet pass through the fog. Hardly a light, more a feeling. Watch as, over long breaths, the city fills with residents and a few places light their lamps. Formamide here, methanol there, a sugar on that corner. No one moves quickly, and yet by morning, the morning measured in a star's first cough, the city is ready to greet heat with a vocabulary. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He slows the words until they almost stop. Sky, a veil that shelters seeds. Stone, a surface that lets strangers pause. Ocean, a film so thin it still knows how to flow. Silence, a temperature that restrains gently. Memory, an ice mantle that keeps accounts for millions of years and then melts, paying out its savings into a new day. Does chemistry dream before life wakes? In the cold, in the dark, on stones too small to see, the universe appears to practice. It does not promise, it prepares. He does not end the sentence. He watches a grain turn once in the faint light of a distant star, sees a hydrogen atom choose a place to stop, and rests with the thought that beginnings sometimes prefer the quiet. He steps onto a shore where the air is orange and the sea smells of cold flame. The wind moves slow, heavy with nitrogen, and somewhere beyond the mist a wave lifts, not of water but of liquid methane and ethane, then lays itself down again with a sound he cannot hear. A drizzle begins. Raindrops fall like tiny pearls, from a sky so cold they do not steam when they touch the ground. He lingers with the image. A hydrology made of hydrocarbons, a blue world's cycle rewritten in amber. How does rain learn a new chemistry and remain rain? A grounding detail steadies the hush. Temperatures hover near 94 Kelvin. Pressure at the surface sits a little higher than Earth's, about 1.5 atmospheres. Under that heavy, hazy sky live lakes and seas of liquid methane and ethane pooled mostly near the poles. Cassini's radar maps show coastlines scalloped and sinuous. Huygens' brief fall and landing photographed river channels braided and rounded pebbles pressed into orange soil. Kraken Mare spans hundreds of kilometers, too large to see across, and Ligeia and Pangamer sit beside it like sister bowls. Radar and altimetry sounding suggest depths of tens to more than 100 meters. Echoes fade in darker patches where the sea drinks the beam like velvet. This is a world where the words cloud, rain, river, delta, and shore hold, only their chemistry has migrated. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He places the 5 words gently in the room. Sky is a copper veil that dims sun to a smudged coin and lets methane condense into storm towers when seasons tilt. Stone is not granite but organics, dunes of hydrocarbon sand, Tholen dark, electrostatically lively, running in long, parallel rows around the equator. Ocean is methane-ethane, transparent as smoke and cold as shadow, filling basins carved by weather as alien as it is familiar. Silence is the thick hush of air that slows sound and travel alike. Memory is a pale bathtub ring, traced along receding shores, marking where the sea once stood. He watches the cycle turn in slow motion. Sunlight trickles, haze absorbs and cools, the anti-greenhouse, while greenhouse heat from methane below keeps the surface from becoming colder still. Methane evaporates from seas, drifts poleward, condenses as clouds, and falls as rain in polar summers. Channels branch and merge into dendritic networks that pour into basins. Between storms, lakes flatline into mirrors. Elsewhere, evaporation outpaces supply and leaves behind solutes, ethane, propane, nitriles, concentrated along margins. The bathtub rings appear as bright radar arcs, chemistry transcribed as shoreline. Another precise bead settles. At the equator, dunes dominate, hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of parallel ridges marching west-east, their sands derived from atmospheric organics that settle and sinter into grains perhaps as large as coffee grounds. Winds strong enough to move them blow only rarely. Seasons and storms do the long work. Near the north, radar glints appear and vanish, the so-called magic islands, ephemeral bright patches on the seas, perhaps waves raised by shifting winds, perhaps fields of bubbles, perhaps thin rafts of floating organics. At the south, Ontario Lacus spreads like a dark eye, its shoreline retouched by wet seasons that came and then left. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory, again the beads. In sky, convective cloud banks rise and drift, then rain falls as methane, drops centimeters across, heavy in this gravity and air, striking ground with a firmness that leaves small, round pits. In stone, rounded clasts at Huygens landing site say river, the way pebbles say it anywhere. Water, or its kin, has tumbled us. In ocean, radar waves skim the surface and return with specular flashes when the sea lies glass flat. When breezes stir, the mirror dulls. In silence, there is no surf's hiss, only the solid hush of liquid under such dense air. In memory, seasonal models predict north-south shifts on decades-long scales. The lake's ledgers fill by one pole, then by the other as the planet leans through its slow year. He asks a question softly. Can chemistry build a cell where water never wets? In this cold, water is rock, a mineral in the crust, but methane is liquid, and theorists sketch membranes, azotisms, made from nitriles like vinyl cyanide that may float and flex in liquid methane the way lipids do in water. Radio observatories have spied vinyl cyanide high in the air. Sediment of organics settles down like snow. Could a solvent so cold sponsor metabolism so slow that time itself becomes the energy source? He does not swear it so. He enjoys the permission to wonder. He invites the listener to imagine standing on a shingle at Kraken Mare's cusp. The sea is glass, a dark mineral gleam. The sky dims and brightens as haze breathes. Far out, a low front wrinkles the surface, centimeter waves, rare but real, pushed by winds that finally find their courage in summer. Along the shore, a pale line curves, brighter than its surroundings, a ring of enriched solutes marking where the sea rested last season. A drizzle begins. Drops tap the lake like muted beads. You lift a cup, and it fills with a liquid that would boil off your glove on a warm day at home, but here sits heavy and patient. A grounding note glints. Huygens spectrometers tasted methane humidity. Its thermometer traced the chill. Its camera saw a landscape of floodplains, channels, and highlands under an amber sky. Cassini, circling for years, watched cloudbursts gather and fade in the north, measured sea levels creep, clocked the moon's slight rocking, libration, hinting at a global subsurface ocean of water ammonia beneath the crust, a deeper sea under the hydrocarbon seas, tides working in layers. Even here, beneath weather, hidden water may slosh and keep time. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory, the rhythm keeps breath slow. In sky, the sun is weak but steady. Saturn's ringed disk hangs like a ghosted coin when geometry allows. In stone, cryovolcanic hints, flow-like features, mounded domes, tempt, though proofs keep their coats on. In ocean, channels dig deltas, where they meet seas. Fans lay down lobes of organics the way rivers lay down sands. In silence, lake levels vary by centimeters over Titan's slow year, a rise and fall like the breathing of a sleeper. In memory, Cassini's archive holds the entire first chapter of this meteorology. Radar, infrared, occultations, a library of oblique glints. He lets another question rise and remain open. What does shore mean at 94 Kelvin? A shore may be a chemical boundary as much as a geometric one, a place where methane gives way to ethane-rich sludge, where nitriles precipitate, where wind-stiffened dunes meet rain-sleeked flats. If a person built a pier here, would it sink, like a finger into chilled syrup, or ring against a crust as hard as horn? He does not choose. He stands with both images and allows the mind to pick the one it likes today. He turns the image slowly. Imagine summertime in the north, long twilight, an amber diffuse day. A storm climbs. Lightning, maybe, or maybe not. If charges can separate in cold haze, the sky would blink. Rain falls, tides barely whisper, and then the flood runs back too, the basin along braided channels, leaving darkened streaks that fade in days. In winter, the sea sheds a skin of haze. Evaporation slows. Dunes at the equator keep their watch, migrating in inches across centuries. Time here prefers paragraphs to sentences. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He repeats the mantra, slower. In sky, the anti-greenhouse veil keeps the star's heat honest. In stone, hydrocarbons gather into grains that remember sunlight not by warmth but by chemistry. In ocean, methane bears navies of imagined skiffs, robotic or otherwise, across kilometers of calm. In silence, the heavy air turns a tossed pebble into a slow parabola, a small grace. In memory, an entry in a catalog reads, Magic Island detected, then not detected, then detected again. A footnote about weather on a sea of cold flame. He offers one more invitation to imagine. Hold out a hand and let a drop fall into your palm. It sits, shimmering, a tiny lens that turns the hazy sun into a pale bead. It does not soak. Your glove is not porous here. You tip your hand and the drop slides, slow, leaving a darker trail that evaporates almost as soon as it appears. Beyond your fingers, Kraken keeps its patience. The shore holds its pale line. Somewhere inland, dunes whisper in their million-year walk, sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He lets them settle. Sky, copper, patient, stone, dark grains that move when they must, ocean, methane, lake flat, sea wide, silence, thick, kind air, memory, rings on rock where rain has been. How does rain learn a new chemistry and remain rain? By keeping the verbs and changing the nouns. Cloud becomes cloud in another script. River becomes river at another temperature. The grammar of cycle proves itself deeper than its old vocabulary. He does not conclude. He watches the drizzle thin to mist, the lake return to mirror, and rests with the thought that some of Earth's ordinary is not Earth's at all. It is weather's, and weather belongs to any world that can remember how, to fall and rise again. He lets the lights of thought drift outward like small boats after dusk. The room is simple again. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He speaks each word once and leaves it where it falls. Sky is a long, blue velvet tucked. Somewhere behind the lids, star-flecked, slow. It does not call. It does not argue. It opens the way a hand opens when it has nothing left to hold. Stone is the weight of the bed, the honest pull of gravity that means stay. Even mountains sleep. He allows the idea to settle beside the ribs and become harmless. Ocean is breath. In, out. A tide that remembers the shore without needing to arrive. The curl of air meets the edge of the body, turns and returns. A moon is somewhere. It keeps time for the water without asking to be seen. Silence is not empty. It is a low field with crickets far away, or the muffled hush beneath a snowfall, or the pause between a lighthouse's turns when the beam is elsewhere, but the sea is still there. It has shape. It has patience. Memory is a pale seam of light, behind the eyes, unhurried. It keeps only what is soft enough to hold. The rest it folds like a blanket and sets at the foot of the bed for later. He imagines a horizon that does not move. The air is clear. A single star breathes faintly in the east, or perhaps that is only a thought's last ember. Either way, there is nothing to do. The mind is a beach after footsteps have washed away. Sky, stone, ocean, silence, memory. He lets them slide apart into wider spaces. Breaths lengthen. Rooms drift. Somewhere a tide turns without sound, and the turning is enough. Night carries itself. Sleep arrives as a small, careful boat and ties its rope to the stillness. End of script. Sleep well.